gonna see if it can run the TV to the morning and connect it up to the solar panel. So let's see. It's also charging up the phone as well. So let's turn the telly on and see what happens. The TV doesn't use much power, so I'm trying it on the telly like this. So it's just gonna run the news and see, getting a signal perfectly fine. No pixelation or anything, so it's using up.
So she's a member of the Parliamentary Labour Party, and no decisions have been taken by Parliament. This row has been rumbling for more than a year.
Leave it in and see
She apologised but was suspended
what we
and
can
only readmitted as last night after a 13-month party process.
adjust the chair somehow.
It's vindictive, it's cruel, and Keir Starmer's actions in forcing Diane Abbott out seem to be a slap in the face.
For decades, Diane Abbott was a reputation as a passionate and outspoken politician, but always from the backbench. It was only with the assent of her friend, like Jeremy Corbyn, that she got reaching the shadow cabinet in 2015, nearly 30 years after that historic arrival in Parliament.
As Britain's first black woman MP.
But since Keir Starmer took over, he's been consistently critical of him on social media. Seats as safe as this are rarely of interest. The Diane Abbott row changed that. Some within the party argue today's confusion has been damaging and distracting from their key campaign aims. Others say it supports one of Keir Starmer's.
I'm just gonna let that run for 12 hours and then we'll see what it does.
I just don't know what she did that upset so many people, that they could be so cruel, so ruthless.
I think she has the opportunity to retire with dignity on what is a very significant record. I personally would like the opportunity to vote for a different Labour candidate.
For now, it seems Diane Abbott's time representing this community could soon come to an end.
And we can go live to that rally now. Our correspondent Nick Erdley is there for us. And Nick, we come to you as Diane Abbott has just finished speaking there. Can you tell us more about what she had to say?
Yeah, I think she's still speaking at the moment, actually. I'm going to get out of the way and let you see what's going on there, because, as you say, we're outside Hackney Town Hall, which is part of the constituency Diane Abbott has represented for 37 years. This is the first time we've heard her speak publicly today about what's going on with the Labour Party. She's just been telling the 200 or so supporters here that she's shocked by what's happened over the past 24 hours, that the Labour Party, that she found out, I should say, yesterday, that she wasn't going to be able to stand for the Labour Party. She's been telling people here that she's not been given a reason, but she thinks ultimately the Labour simply want to exclude her from Parliament, and she's been pointing out that she's been a member of the Labour Party for 50 years and that she's always been loyal to the party, even if she's had some disagreements with the party over that period. Now, let's have a listen in actually to what Diane Abbott's saying this morning.
When I remember when I first ran as Labour MP
Just
all the way
seeing
back
how long
in
it will
1987.
run the TV for.
People thought I could
It's
People
also
thought
charging
you
up
couldn't
the phone as
elect a
well.
woman to Parliament
So
because
it's
we've never
doing
done
quite a lot of
before.
work.
But local people
So it's just going to run
went
for 12
out,
hours
campaigned,
from
knocked
7
on
in the
doors,
morning.
and made me
And
Britain's
we'll see
first
how long it stays on for.
woman member of Parliament. And I have to keep faith with that loyalty. I have to keep faith with my principles. I have to keep faith with supporting and speaking up for equalities, poor people, for the community here in Hackney. So I promise you that as long as it is possible, I will be the Member of Parliament for Hackney North and EastAngliaUK.
Diane Abbott addressing about 200 supporters here at Hackney Town Hall about the situation with her just now. I say the situation because, as we've heard her say in this crowd, she says she's been barred for standing for the Labour Party at the general election in this area. The party, Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, has said that's not the case, that the final decision hasn't actually been made yet. So there's some confusion. It seems to be quite plausible that the process is still playing out, but Miss Abbott is saying that she's absolutely certain she's not being allowed to stand by the Labour Party. It is proving to be, as you can see from the crowd here, a big row. Chatting to people in the Labour Party today, not just people on the left, not Diane Abbott's natural allies, but also some towards the centre, people who naturally support Keir Starmer. There's a lot of frustration about how this has panned out. A lot of anger is
coming in,
Labour's
020
campaign over the course of
going
the
out.
day. And it seems like this is going to roll on, because as you see, we've just had
Shame
Diane
that doesn't
Abbott out
stay
here
on.
accusing the Labour leadership of wanting her out of Parliament, saying she's not going to go quietly. You heard her wrap up there saying she will be the Member of Parliament here for as long as possible. All eyes now on what the Labour Party and what Keir Starmer say next.
Yeah, exactly. And I wonder, Nick, as well, whether Keir Starmer will be looking at that rally, seeing the strength of support, the strength of I guess that promise that Diane Abbott made there, that she said, as long as possible, I will be the MP of Hackney North. Do you think this will affect his decision making?
Not sure is the honest answer. I think there's evidence that it might not. Just look at what happened with Jeremy Corbyn, who's now standing as an independent candidate in London, launching his campaign tonight, by the way. He's doing that about 3 or 4 miles down the road from where I am in Islington. So I think it's pretty clear that Keir Starmer isn't that bothered about riling some on the left with his decisions. The question, I think, more broadly Keir Starmer is facing is, does he have the backing of the majority of his party with this decision? I think it's slightly different, because, I mean, you've seen the support for Diane Abbott here, but there is a lot of reluctance in the Parliamentary Labour Party to throw her out or to stop her from standing at the general election. Why? Well, I mean, as you heard, I'm not sure if you got any of the speeches that we heard just before Diane Abbott, but there are a lot of people who point out she was a trailblazer. She was the first female black MP in Parliament. She's been there for 37 years. She is a pretty big deal in Labour circles, a part of the Labour Party's history. And, you know, there is a reluctance to see her leave under a cloud. So, yeah, look, I mean, Keir Starmer has a lot to weigh up. He would say this is for an independent process, it's to be played out, the final decision has not been made. But it's pretty clear from what we've just seen here that if the decision is made to stop Diane Abbott standing, there'll be a big row about it. There'll be a lot of uproar in the local community, certainly from the couple of hundred or so people who are here, and it may do even more to overshadow Labour's election campaign. That's the thing that will really worry Labour HQ this evening is that on day 7 of this campaign, there is a big row over internal factions in the Labour Party, which is causing a lot of concern right up to the top of the party.
Okay, Nick Eardley, for now, thank you very much. Well, also this evening, the former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn is expected to launch his own campaign in Islington North. He'll be standing as an independent and therefore almost certainly running against a candidate from his former party. Well, not all of the candidates who will be standing in Islington North, where Mr Corbyn plans to contest the seat, have been confirmed yet. These are the declared candidates so far, and we will of course be updating that list once all candidates are confirmed, and we'll make it available on our website. Now, junior doctors in England will begin a strike just a week before millions of people go to the polls. The 5-day walkout will start at 7 AM on June the 27th and end early on Tuesday the 2nd of July. That's just 2 days before Election Day. Junior doctors make up almost half the NHS workforce, meaning there'll be thousands more cancellations for treatments and appointments. It's their 11th strike since March last year. The government says it's a highly cynical tactic during an election campaign. The doctors say there have been no new pay offers despite talks. Our health editor Hugh Pym has this report.
It started in March last year. Junior doctors in England out on strike in their dispute over pay. By the summer, walkouts were continuing, but for a time with talks underway, there were hopes of a settlement. By February this year, with the 10th strike, the dispute wasn't settled. Then came mediation talks, they failed, and another strike has been called.
The government walked away and collapsed talks. There was nothing more that we could do to be able to have those talks with them because they refused. And so now we're asking, if they're not going to talk to us, to make a public commitment that gives the confidence in our committee that there is a plan for pay restoration so that we can call off these strikes.
What do we want? Pay restoration! Do we want it now?
By pay restoration, the BMA mean a 35% increase phased in to compensate for inflation over more than a decade. The government said that wasn't reasonable and awarded an average 9% last year. The Health Secretary Victoria Atkins had this response to the Doctors' Union.
I am dismayed, but also on behalf of patients, I'm angry. We know that industrial action last year had the impact that 1.4 million appointments were cancelled as a result of strikes. And to call this strike now, during a general election campaign, I think shows very cynical politicisation.
Out in Sheffield today, there was a mixed view of the junior doctors' strike plan.
I really support what they're doing in many ways, but I think they'll have to be careful that it doesn't backfire on them.
Why would you upset the apple cart when you don't know who's going to have the reins of power to make the decisions in your favour a few weeks hence?
So I can imagine the impact of this on you know, like a lot of people that have to wait, or a lot of people that require like new diagnoses. And
if not, when are people going to listen? You know, they're doing it for a reason, for unfair pay and stuff.
Labour said the chaos would continue under the Conservatives, but what would they do to resolve the dispute?
That 35% pay claim is not one that I would be able to meet on July the 5th. I'd be willing to sit down and negotiate because the journey back to fair pay is exactly that. It's going to be a journey, not an event. So let's work together on pay.
The Liberal Democrats were clear where the blame lies.
Well, this is a complete mess, isn't it? And it's the patients who I really fear for. The fact is that the Conservatives have had months, if not years, to resolve all of these strikes, and the fact that strikes are happening yet again just shows that they're leaving our NHS in a state of crisis and chaos.
And this is what it'll mean for patients. Empty operating theatres and yet more cancellations of appointments and procedures. Hugh Pym, BBC News.
Now, Rishi Sunak has been campaigning in southwest England today. He said his party would replace what he called rip-off university degrees and fund 100,000 more apprenticeships instead. The southwest is a key battleground for the Conservatives. Our political editor Chris Mason has been following the Prime Minister on his campaign train today.
Bodmin in Cornwall, 1 week into the general election campaign. And the verdict from some folk here?
It's okay, really. I think it's a good idea to have it. they're looking for your vote, of course, but I just think they're fighting with each other and it's ridiculous.
What do you make of the whole election fun and games?
It's a total nightmare. I can't bear it. I cannot watch television.
It's just dreadful.
You can't be telling me you're not watching television.
I'm trying not to.
Claims and policies, trains and yet more trains. The Prime Minister arriving in Penzance this morning, not looking too rough after a night on the sleeper from London. First stop, a rail maintenance depot to talk up his idea on apprenticeships in England.
A future Conservative government will take the bold action of closing down underperforming university degrees that are letting our young people down, and instead using that money to fund 100,000 new high-quality apprenticeships. Oh, literally 2 weeks ago.
Meet, greet, talk and move on is the rhythm for all the party leaders out and about. It is lunchtime, this is Lisgard, and the Prime Minister is arriving at a local broadband company.
I've heard you're a bit of an expert.
Having a go at other people's jobs, all part of many a visit. And listen out for the generous job offer, depending how things turn out.
That was a perfect slide.
The winding road to the 4th of July polling day still has plenty around the corner, and where every announcement prompts a flurry of reaction as each party seeks to undermine the others.
Our message that the Conservatives let people down in the West Country over the health service, over the economy, over things like sewage in the rivers and on our beaches is resonating with people.
The Conservatives have to say, if they're going to announce any policy, how they're going to pay for it. That's what we deliver in the Labour Party, fully funded, fully costed policies, and that's what we expect from the Conservatives.
Of course, in this general election campaign, it's really the cost of the union that's on the table. We've got a cost of living crisis inflicted by Westminster, we've got challenges in relation to Brexit, and of course austerity policies.
The Prime Minister's made quite a thing of projecting a certain energy. He's hurtled around England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland the first couple of days. Now he's here in the southwest of England, a region teeming with Conservative seats he really needs to cling on to. And after a morning in Cornwall, next it's Devon. Late this afternoon, Rishi Sunak arrived in Dunkeswell at a military vehicle manufacturer to talk to members of staff and to reporters. Prime Minister, there's no doubt you're meeting plenty of people out and about, but are you changing many minds?
Well, look, Chris, you can see we're having a conversation here, but I'm determined to talk to as many people as I can across this country over the remaining weeks of this campaign. That's how I started it, and as you heard, I'm thoroughly enjoying myself. I'm enjoying having conversations with people about the things that matter. Yes, well, I am changing minds.
The tour for all the party leaders trundles on. Oh, and you can tell the election is getting nearer when you see pictures like this. 5 weeks to go. Chris Mason, BBC News, in Devon.
Our Labour MP says he has been suspended from the party because of a complaint made about his behaviour. Lloyd Russell-Wiles says he has been told he won't be eligible to be a candidate at the election because of what he believes to be a vexatious and politically motivated complaint about his behaviour 8 years ago. He says he will cooperate with the Labour Party process to clear his name. Labour says it's investigating fully in line with its rules and procedures. Mr Russell-Wiles was elected as the MP for Brighton Kent Town in 2017. Well, let's cross live to Westminster now and speak to our political correspondent Damien Grammatica. So first, Damien, have we heard anything more from the Labour Party about this suspension?
No, just pretty much as you said there. I mean, what we know is that Lloyd Russell-Moyle, he told local party workers and activists about this suspension. That's kind of how the news came out. Our BBC reporter in the region confirmed from him, exactly as you said, that he'd been suspended because of a complaint. What we understand is that complaint may relate to behaviour said to have happened, I think, 8 years ago. He was elected in 2017, so 7 years ago. But as you were saying, he will be suspended now while there is this investigation, and that means that he won't be able to stand in this election. Labour simply saying, as you were saying there, that they takes complaints seriously, they're fully investigated in line with procedures, and any appropriate disciplinary action would then be taken. One thing we do also believe is that this complaint was only received last week, we understand.
And it was only last week, wasn't it, that Rishi Sunak was outside Downing Street calling this election. The parties certainly aren't hanging around there, as we saw in Chris's report, are they?
Yes, exactly. As a week ago, as Chris was saying, I think that Rishi Sunak was getting drenched in the rain outside Downing Street, calling this snap election, trying perhaps to catch the other parties off guard, and then being sort of out of the traps around the country. Today we saw him down in the southwest there. I mean, that's interesting, I think, because it's an area where the Conservatives have quite a lot of seats. Liberal Democrats historically used to hold seats there, used to be quite strong for them. So targets for the Liberal Democrats, defensive seats for the Conservatives, so a pretty defensive strategy, if you like. And that kind of fits a bit, if you like, with some of the sort of policy announcements we've been hearing, the Conservatives pushing out, talking about pensions and not taxing the state pension, that idea that they put out. Today, this idea about apprenticeships, which we know appeals to all age groups, but also is particularly popular with, polling suggests, with older age groups. So a reason why the Conservatives might want to be in that region and making those sorts of announcements. Liberal Democrats, of course, and you heard there in Chris's report, saying their response to some of that is to say that they point to the Conservatives' record, point to the health service, the state of waterways, and say, why would you vote for the Conservatives when you look at that record?
Okay, Damien, thank you very much indeed. And just a quick reminder for you that you can keep up to date on all election-related developments as they happen. You can take a look at the live page we're running. It's all on the BBC News app and also on our website. Okay, let's take a look at some of the day's other news now. And the wife of a woman who was stabbed to death in Bournemouth last Friday has paid tribute to her as one of the most amazing, funny, kind and energetic souls. 34-year-old Amy Gray died at the scene on Delhi Chine Beach. Sian Gray, seen here on the right, said her wife's giggly laugh and big smile will be hard to be without. She said, "Words cannot describe the pain that we feel. Amy was the most loving wife and mother, a larger-than-life character. I will miss you immensely, my love, to the moon and back, forever and always." Well, we've been speaking to our correspondent Duncan Kennedy, who is in Bournemouth.
Both Amy's wife, Sian, and indeed her mother, this poignant tribute issued this afternoon through the Dorset Police Press Office, and also that first official photograph from the family showing, as you said there, Amy on the left wearing the glasses next to her wife, Sian, and what was clearly a much happier day for them. They're beaming at the camera, both smiling away there in that photograph that's been officially released this afternoon. In her tribute to Amy, Sian writes in full that words cannot describe the pain that we feel. She says Amy was the most loving wife and mother. Her giggly laugh and big smile will be hard to be without. A larger-than-life character. I will miss you immensely, my love. And also, Amy's mother, Sharon Macklin, has issued her own tribute to her daughter. In her statement, she says, "As a family, we are devastated to have lost one of the most amazing, funny, kind, and energetic souls." She says, "When Amy entered a room, it filled with laughter, and her presence could not be ignored. She was beautiful inside and out." Now, here in Bournemouth itself this afternoon, alongside us, we've got the cliffs, the hillside here, covered in greenery, and all day again today we've seen police officers scrambling down on abseiling ropes, poking away, prodding away in the undergrowth, sometimes clearing it with a trimmer to try and look for any kind of evidence in connection with this assault, which took place about 400 yards down the beach from where I'm standing. Separately, Dorset Police have told us last night that working together with the Metropolitan Police, they arrested a 20-year-old man from South London in the Croydon area. Working together with the Met, there were intelligence officers and some armed police officers, and that 20-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder and attempted murder. And separately, in terms of the 38-year-old woman who was also stabbed in the same incident on Friday night, there's been no fresh update today from the police on her condition. The most recent update we had was yesterday, in which the police said she remains in hospital in a serious condition.
Duncan Kennedy there in Bournemouth. Now to New York, where the 12 jurors in Donald Trump's hush money trial have begun their deliberations in the first ever criminal trial of a US president. The judge told them to set aside any opinions they had about Mr. Trump and warned them not to convict him solely on the testimony of his former fixer. Just 5 months away from the presidential election, Mr. Trump is facing 34 counts of falsifying business records, allegedly to cover up a hush money payment to an adult film star in the final weeks of the 2016 election. He denies the charges. During the trial, jurors heard testimony from Stormy Daniels, who described in lurid detail a 2006 sexual encounter with the former president, and from Michael Cohen, Donald Trump's former attorney and fixer, who paid Ms. Daniels $130,000 allegedly to buy her silence during his 2016 White House run. The defense argued the case was built on lies told by Mr. Cohen. Let's have a listen to what Mr. Trump had to say outside the court a short while ago.
Mother Teresa could not meet these charges. These charges are rigged. The whole thing is rigged. The whole country's a mess between the borders and fake elections, and you have a trial like this where the judge is so conflicted he can't breathe. He's got to do his job. It's not for me, that I can tell you. It's a disgrace. And I mean that. Mother Teresa could not meet those charges, but we'll see.
Earlier we spoke to our North America correspondent, Neda Torfik.
Inside, jurors are deliberating in the first ever criminal trial of a former president, trying to reach a unanimous decision on that historic decision. And outside of the court, there is certainly a charged atmosphere as we get closer to a potential verdict. Security has been stepped up, and we've seen a larger number of competing protests in the last 2 days than we really have throughout a large portion of this trial. In front of me are about 2 dozen or so, potentially more, of Donald Trump's supporters, occasionally yelling out in support of him, saying how much they love Donald Trump, and shouting out derogatory terms about his political enemies and the trial itself, but very much an air of anticipation outside here while the jury is inside deliberating.
Neda Torfik there, and you could follow all the latest developments from the trial on the BBC News website or app, and we're running a live page with updates. We have correspondents at the court in New York, so you can follow it all as it happens there. Now here, almost 200 years after it launched, the London newspaper, the Evening Standard, is axing its daily print edition. It will be published once a week instead. Circulation figures have fallen in the past 5 years from 800,000 to 250,000. The paper has been handed out for free since 2009. The fall in readership is being blamed on more people working from home and the fact that Wi-Fi is now available on the underground. There's been another volcanic eruption southwest of the Icelandic capital of Reykjavik, the fifth in 6 months. The fissure, more than 1 kilometre long, opened on the Reykjanes Peninsula around noon of local time. This live footage from the site shows a wall of molten rock shooting up to a height of an incredible 50 metres and huge plumes of smoke covering most of the sky. The eruptions taking place in an uninhabited part of Iceland, but the fishing village of Grindavik to the south and the Blue Lagoon Spa, one of the country's most popular tourist resorts, have been evacuated there. Now on the BBC News, it's time to digest the day's election campaigning in Newscast with Adam Fleming and the team.
Political correspondent Alex Forsyth here. Oh, she's tapping away.
Sorry.
Is that a social call or what?
Social call.
Oh, okay. All right. Sorry to interrupt.
Sorry, it was a social call, but now I'm
in the game.
And Nick Watt, political editor of, am I calling it Election News Night now? Because that's what you called it last night.
Yeah, nightly election news night has now.
Okay, well, welcome back. We finally got details from ITV of their first prime ministerial debate. It's going to be on Tuesday at 9 p.m, which gives us a short, brief window to discuss our favourite election debate moments. Alex?
My personal favourite memory of one of the election night debates was I was on the campaign trail, and this would have been 2015, and we were all staying in a random hotel in a seafront somewhere, and the whole election team got round to watch the first debate with like wine and cheese, which is so civilised because we weren't covering it because we were just watching it. So
just watching it for enjoyment.
Literally for kicks, yeah. It was for fun. It was great.
Well, clearly the wisest line that has ever been said in any television election debate. What are you building? What is building up? Oh, let's work that out. 10 out of 10 for originality. I agree with Nick.
The first one ever in UK.
Yeah.
I'm torn between that one because that was when I got stranded in Northern Ireland because of the Icelandic volcanic ash cloud.
Was that
2010.
In 2010?
Yeah, and so it took me like 3 days to get back home from Northern Ireland. And then, yeah, it was a ridiculous ferry journey, of which I'll tell you about another day. And then also the one in Cambridge, where none of the big names were going to turn up, and then at the last second Jeremy Corbyn turned up, and that was actually pretty exciting. The debate itself wasn't that illuminating, but like that sort of shot of adrenaline for the news that night was quite cool.
And we all had to make emergency trips to Cambridge, didn't we?
Yeah, well, I was
we were going.
I was actually there already.
You were there.
Because I'm an aficionado of these things. I turn up to them even if the VIPs aren't
If you're invited.
Anyway, thank you for accepting my invite to be on this episode of Newscast.
Newscast from the BBC.
Hello, it's Adam in the studio.
Hello, it's Alex in the studio.
And it's Nick. I agree with Nick in the studio.
You can't agree with yourself. I agree with you being here. Right, stop that. Chris Mason, he's in the West Country, but he will probably turn up maybe in that screen and unannounced time. So let's see what happens. Anyway, talking about who's going to be turning up for the election and personnel and stuff, there's been a bit of a rolling mystery today. I mean, it started yesterday when we were chatting on the last episode of Newscast about Diane Abbott. So she is now a Labour MP again, except Parliament dissolves in a few hours' time, so she won't be a Labour MP again. But she's got the Labour whip back for a bit. But is she or is she not going to be a Labour candidate at the next election? And is it because she's been banned from being one or not?
Well, big question mark with a dot on the bottom, because if we pick up where we were left off, which was last time we were talking about this, was on Tuesday's newscast, and at that point we said there were things developing around what was going on with Diane Abbott, and very brief history. We know that she was suspended from the Parliamentary Labour Party because of comments she made about racism, for which she apologised, but there was this incredibly long-running investigation over a year where this was unresolved. And then what happened was, last night, there started to emerge reports that she got the whip back, as you said, which turned out to be true, but then the Times newspaper was reporting that despite that she was going to be barred from standing as a candidate, hence some chaos and confusion. And then this morning, so Wednesday morning, Diane Abbott confirmed to my colleague Joe Pike, BBC political correspondent, that she had been barred from standing. After that, Keir Starmer was asked about this, and he said no, she hadn't been barred from standing. So what we've really had now is a day of confusion about where we exactly are. Is Diana going to be a candidate in this election or not?
And Keir Starmer was at an event in Worcester, and this is where and how he said that.
No decision has been taken to bar Diane Abbott. The process that we were going through ended with the restoration of the whip the other day. So she's a member of the Parliamentary Labour Party, and no decision has been taken barring her.
Okay, Nick, what's your theory about what's gone on?
Well, what's so magnificent about this is Diane Abbott this morning saying that I've been barred. And the reason why they're both right is that Keir Starmer is right. The National Executive Committee of the Labour Party, which at this stage vets and decides on candidates, has not considered Diane Abbott's case because she hasn't applied to be a candidate. Were she to apply, every single ally of Keir Starmer I've spoken to have told me that she would not be allowed to be a candidate. And the whole point of what has been going on in the last few weeks is that there were negotiations around what one pretty key player described to me as a golden bridge. And the golden bridge was that the whip would be restored to Diane Abbott. At that point, she would make it clear that she wouldn't be contesting the election, and then there would be a whole load of effusive praise for Diane Abbott from Keir Starmer downwards. That golden bridge, as one of these people said to me, has been blown up. It's been blown up because my colleague Victoria Derbyshire had this great scoop, which proved that the process investigating her had ended in December, and then it was blown out because there was that briefing, as Alex said, to the Times last night saying that she would be barred, which is probably where you'd be if this journey completed its end, but is not technically where we are now. And there's a lot of anger about which supporters of Keir Starmer may well have briefed the Times.
Right, okay, so it was actually quite a fragile compromise, and then multiple people, like it was like a bridge made out of match.
Diane Abbott is really angry because she is making it clear that she had not told anyone that she was intending to retire, because of course nothing formal had happened. But there was one of her allies who was the go-between with the leadership, trying to construct this golden bridge. But as you say, it was built on a pretty flimsy framework.
Okay, Alex, the reason Nick is talking about the NEC being involved here is because we're now in this period where, like, the central parties, certainly in the Labour Party's case, they can control in constituencies about who the candidates are going to be in these places than a few months ago.
Yeah, so the NEC, the National Executive Committee of the Labour Party, which makes final decisions around candidacy, and obviously that process has kind of been stood up all of a sudden because of the way that Rishi Sunak called the election, and so they are having to make all of these decisions within quite a tight time frame, because I think I'm right in saying it's June the 7th, which is the deadline for candidates to be in place, in seats, ready to fight the general election campaign. So that has sort of allowed, and in actual fact, while all of this has been rumbling on for a long time around Diane Abbott, and again we discussed on Tuesday's newscast the fact that increasingly Labour front benchers are going out and being asked, is this been resolved, if this hasn't, and what they have been very keen to say this point, because when Jeremy Corbyn to try and put some distance between the front bench and some of these decisions that are taken around personnel. So it's allowed some of those Labour front benchers to give them that distance when they've been asked about it. But now, I think, despite the fact that there clearly is a role for the NEC as Nick to play, the way that this has been handled and the way that it's played out so publicly in the last 24 hours or so is absolutely the last place the Labour leadership wanted to be with this, because there are around Keir Starmer about what may or may not have been leaked. There are people very angry who are close to Diane Abbott about the way that she has been seen to be treated so publicly, somebody who's been such a long-standing member of the Labour Party and such an influential figure in the Labour movement in so many ways. So I think, you know, whatever you say about exactly who was responsible, the end result doesn't take away from the fact that this looks pretty bad right now.
And the problem with shadow cabinet members and the leadership saying, not me, Gov, is that it is true that that was the case until December. An NEC panel was looking at it, and it has to be at arm's length, because the Labour Party got into terrible trouble with the Equality and Human Rights Commission under Jeremy Corbyn's leadership when it was seen to intervene.
It was getting too personal.
Yeah. In December, that process ended with a formal warning, and the final hurdle that Diane Abbott had to do was to do an online anti-Semitism awareness course, which she completed in February. In February, the matter went to the Chief Whip, Sir Alan Campbell. What does the Chief Whip of any party do? They enforce the will and the authority of the leader of their party. In other words, the issue then did rest with the shadow cabinet. It did rest with the Chief Whip. So it's very difficult for the Labour Party to say, not us, Gov. Where they are able to say that is as soon as the election was called, these NEC procedures kick in for the selection of candidates. So at that point, candidates are NEC. But in between Diane Abbott completing this course and the election being called, this rested with the Chief Whip, who's very close to the leader.
And it is being weaponised by the Conservative Party, because I've noticed every press release or email the Tories have sent out today, whether it's about an NHS waiting list, which was Labour's big intended story today, or whether it's about claims about public spending and how much pledges will cost, the Tories then go, oh, and then look at Keir Starmer and him not being honest about what happened to Diane Abbott. So it doesn't matter what the email starts with. That from the Tories.
Well, and using stronger language than that, Rick Holden issued a statement last night saying that Keir Starmer lied. I mean, Keir Starmer is a lawyer So he chooses his language very, very carefully. And it is indeed true that once the election happened, it went to the NEC. Now, there are some people in the Labour Party saying, bring this row on. This is a row with the Labour left. We're very happy to have that row. This is a changed Labour Party. Jeremy Corbyn is not going to be a candidate in this election. Changed Labour Party. We've seen off the hard left, as they would say, that has produced electoral dividends. What some people are saying, and not just people on the left, Starmer loyalists are saying, Diane Abbott is not Jeremy Corbyn. Diane Abbott, they say, is an icon of the Labour movement. The first black woman MP elected in 1987, an MP for nearly 40 years, and those who want to have a war with the hard left, these people are saying is, watch out, be careful, Diane Abbott is a totally different political figure to Jeremy Corbyn.
And it's also, because we were discussing, it is exactly that point, even if the Labour leadership were willing to have this fight with what they see as the left of the Labour Party in one context, the way that this has played out in 24 hours is now, I think, the distraction and the sense of confusion and potentially some might even say chaos around the management of these processes. No matter where you are, that is not something that you want to be a perception of the way you're running things at this point in a campaign.
And at this point in newscast, which is 6:42 on Wednesday evening, there's another situation developing with Labour, with this Labour MP called Lloyd Russell Moyle. He's got a seat in the South Coast of England. He's also quite kind of political tradition, whatever you want to call that. Nick, just explain what's happening. He's put out a statement tonight.
That's right. So Lloyd Russell Moyle is one of the Brighton MPs. He's a member of the campaign group. The campaign group is the group that is on the left. They're the group that basically produced Jeremy Corbyn, John McDonnell, all that. And he has put out a statement this evening, Lloyd Russell Moyle, saying that he has been suspended from the Labour whip very, very close to the deadline for the selection of candidates. And he's saying that there is now an investigation. What Labour is saying is that last week they were in receipt of a very serious complaint. They take these complaints very seriously and they need to investigate them. The problem for Lloyd Russell Moyle is that there will be an investigation. He says he will fully comply, he'll cooperate with this investigation, but it will not be done until after the election. Therefore, he will not be able to stand. And he said this complaint is vexatious and politically motivated.
And Alex, just theorising about this, it means that Labour's critics, internally and externally, will be able to make similar arguments about they have done with the Diane Abbott case, which is, oh, hang on, these procedures are quite handy if you wanted to perhaps exclude people from the Labour left.
Yeah, it comes back to exactly that point we're talking about. Keir Starmer, I think, has seen it as in his interest to be seen to be taking on the left of the Labour Party on one guise or another. But obviously what the timing of this does is just reopen what we know are kind of existing different ideological dividing lines within the Labour movement. And they are there and they have always existed. And Keir Starmer has, been able to say he's changed the party from what it was under Jeremy Corbyn's leadership. He's been keen to point to that. But that doesn't mean that this isn't going to cause some consternation and no doubt a backlash from people that sit on the left of the Labour movement.
And what the Labour left will be saying is that the sealed tomb is filling up. This was the phrase, the sealed tomb was a phrase that Peter Mandelson used.
Right.
And the sealed tomb is where we need to put the Labour left. Right. Because if the Labour left are seen to be at the forefront, we lose. It was a phrase he used in the 1990s. And it is true, on the left of the Labour Party, they say basically from about 1992 until about 2015, it was very, very difficult to get selected if you were a candidate on the left. I think John McDonnell obviously got elected in 1997. There weren't many after that. And they will be saying on the left, the sealed tomb is opening up. What I think the Labour leadership would say is, well, look, we got this complaint about Lloyd Russell Moyle last week, and we acted on it, and we would not be taking this lightly.
Lloyd Russell Moyle might not be a household name, but he's quite well known in Westminster, isn't he? I'm thinking about the time that he spoke very movely in the chamber about living with HIV, and didn't he grab the mace at one point? That big gold, that sticky thing that's on the table in between the two front benches. What was that about again?
I think
it was in protest.
I think it was over Brexit. I think it was. I can't quite remember. But yeah, no, he's on the left. He's a very passionate guy. But there have been instances. I'm sort of trawling through my memory where he has behaved in a way that has caused him to question. There was an issue with Miriam Cates, who's one of the socially conservative MPs, where he was seen and sit next to her, and that was seen as sort of overly aggressive. So it is a mixed record.
And you know the answer to this. Did Michael Heseltine grab the mace in the 80s famously?
I grabbed the mace, and it was in the 1960s. And I think it was over the nationalisation of shipbuilding, and it was a bill that went through, and the way that the votes went were open to question, and Labour MPs started singing the red flag in what he regarded as a triumphant way, and then he grabbed the mace, and that led to his great nickname of Tarzan.
Nick, your memory is phenomenal.
Well, yeah, but I'm probably wrong, because it's the top of my head. But
Newscasters know their dates. They will message in at newscast@bbc.co.uk if you're wrong. And of course, that was pre-televisualisation of Parliament, so you and Alex will never see that.
No.
Just have to picture it.
I can't even imagine that. You know, it's always been a kind of constant there in the background of my life.
I have a small confession to make, that because I've heard that story many times and just through my whole life, I think when I was younger, because of his nickname of Tarzan and grabbing the, I sort of pictured him like in a loincloth doing it.
Assumed that probably was.
Yeah, when I was like 12,
But I remember when you could only listen to Parliament on the radio. And I remember tuning in. I should have been doing my A-level revision.
Alex, radio is what they had before podcasts.
Oh, radio.
And I tuned in on longwave to listen to the live debate of the Westland debate, which, you know, very nearly brought down the famous debate when she walked in to the Commons and said, I may not be Prime Minister by the end of the day. And then Neil Kinnock did a performance that was, you know, pretty subpar. And I talked to Jacob Rees-Mogg about this, and he said, oh, I listened to that exact debate as well.
Oh, you too. Right, we're talking about old tech. I'm going to put my finger in my ear, because I think we can speak to Chris Mason on the phone.
Hello.
It's like doing a phone-in show. Caller, where are you calling from, caller? What do you want to ask the panel?
First time caller, long time listener. It's Chris in Devon here.
Do they not have television in Devon? I'm going to say you expect to see you on the screen.
To be honest, I would be crying out for the long-wave signal that Nick was just talking about there to help project me into a newscast HQ in perhaps slightly better quality than a rotary phone line. But hey, at least rotary phone lines work, which is more than can be said for the bits of contraption I was attempting to construct just now. So we can hear each other. That's a good thing.
Yes.
I'm ready to roll.
And what have you been working on today?
So we've been following the Prime Minister around today. So we did a bit of a stint with Keir Starmer for Labour on Monday, and then Nigel Farage yesterday, and Liberal Democrats and the Scottish National Party in the coming days. And today, hurtling around the southwest of England, following Rishi Sunak, who's been really kind of leaning into the kind of energetic, non-stop frenetic campaigning thing. And I know all the leaders are doing that, and they've all got to get to A to B on various bits of public transport or private transport. But Rishi Sunak really kind of consciously leads sleeper from London to Cornwall overnight into this morning, and then talking about apprenticeships. That's the big thing in conservative circles today as far as policy announcements is concerned in England. And then doing one of these Q&As. He likes to turn up at a workplace and gather a kind of gaggle of employees in a kind of semicircle around him and do the pitch, which is uncannily similar from one workplace to the next, but then that kind of makes sense from their perspective in terms of message, discipline and consistency. And then taking questions from some of the employees, and if they're so inclined, a couple of reporters as well. And then shuffling off to the next place. So that's what we've been doing, kind of tailing the Prime Minister today as we head into a place called Ford Street.
Okay, and have you seen any, I was going to say, I've not seen any kind of lame pictures of Rishi Sunak doing the rounds on social media for the last kind of 20 hours or so. Do you think maybe the Conservative campaign has kind of got out of that sort of doom loop people were saying they were in, where you would turn up to places with bad names or be photographed in front of interesting things?
Maybe. I think, I don't know, I mean, maybe your campaigns get a little blast of these at some point. We've still got another 5 weeks. It's fair to say there haven't been those things that, or was it the Titanic Quarter in Belfast, exit sign on the aeroplane? The funny thing is with that exit sign on the aeroplane, when you're on a plane that small, I wasn't on that trip, but when you're on a plane that small and you post photos, the chances are one of those exit signs is going to be visible. And part of me wonders, as much as, you know, PR types and spin doctors and special advisors try and avoid those those pictures where, you know, you're near an exit sign or you line up just in line with the antlers on the wall or whatever. But because they were very keen, they've definitely been keen to project that sense of zipping about everywhere and visualising that, not just obviously turning up in lots of different places, which all of these have done, but kind of visualising and demonstrating that hurdling around. You know, desire to do that came with the downside of that sign. And maybe things like that are trivial. I mean, to an extent they are trivial, but they do get commented on, don't they? And therefore they're perhaps sucking away a bit of sort of energy and time from talking about the other stuff. The other thing that's really striking the Conservatives, just being with them today and in the last few days, and we've noticed this now for 3 or 4 days, is that they're trying to make a splash early on by saying new stuff. And by announcing new policy, particularly that whole national service thing, and then we've had the stuff about apprenticeships, the state pension as well, to try and make an argument that they've got fresh and new stuff to say, and their opponents don't. And Labour's thing has been that bit more kind of cautious, judicious, core messages, not getting drawn into any kind of hostages to fall to.
Chris, I'm going to let you go because someone else wants to use the phone box.
Yeah, I'm down to my last 50p.
Yeah, beep, 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 beep. George, remember that
We
noise?
can hear you, and the world will soon hear you, to coin a phrase.
Right, safe travels, Chris.
Cheers, guys. See ya.
Nick, were you going to make an observation or just?
No, I'm just interested to know it's interesting that the perception is that it's been a really bad start for the campaign for the Conservatives, and the first polls taken in the last week, most of them show all looking good for Labour, or if anything, slightly increasing their lead, although there's one polls to jail partners that say that the Labour lead has gone down by 2 points. So that is the perception, and yet, in terms of substance, Chris reeled off that list of policies, the national service thing, the pension triple lock plus, apprenticeships today. In terms of substance, the Tories are talking about new stuff. Labour is sort of talking about stuff that's already announced, although what Labour would say is the reason why we're talking about stuff that was already announced is that's credible, serious stuff that stands up.
In terms of other stuff that happened today, junior doctors in England are going to go on strike again, and the strike will end 2 days before polling day. What's your theory, Alex, about what impact that might have, if any?
Well, I mean, you can just take the fact of it is that you're going to have, during that period, you know, again, people are going to have hospital appointments cancelled, you know, people are going to see the impact of the doctor strikes as they've seen them before, and therefore it is perhaps no surprise that the Conservatives' reaction to it was, oh, this is so political from the junior doctors. The junior doctors say, well, actually, if you'd resolved the pay issue, then we wouldn't be in this situation having to strike again. But yeah, either way you look at it, the timing is going to be key because it's coming right in that final week of the general election campaign. And I think already what you've seen again today are the questions for the parties. If you are in the next government, how are you going to resolve this issue? Because it's going to be going on for ages and ages and ages. And, you know, we know that there was a sort of inching towards mediation before the general election period. When seeing the Shadow Health Secretary, interestingly today, what he was saying is, I'm not going to commit to the 35% pay rise that the junior doctors are asking for, but I'd work towards a pay deal in the longer term. But, you know, I think it's just going to pose the future. It's going to focus minds at that point in the election campaign on one of the key issues, which is the NHS, which is what Labour had wanted to actually talk about today, regardless, right to the point that people are just going to go to the polls.
And Victoria Atkins, the Health Secretary, said the British Medical Association was using a highly cynical tactic. She said, in politics to help patients, not trade unions, the Conservative government has taken tough decisions to keep public spending down, to bear down on inflation, which is now back to normal. And also, just very quickly, I thought with the Labour announcement on NHS waiting lists, it was interesting. They've now narrowed down their target. They're not going to target all waiting lists, all appointments. It's people who are having to wait more than 18 weeks, which is an old government target. That's what they're going to focus on. So actually, you could still end up waiting quite a long time under West Streeting's NHS.
And their focus, and correct me if I'm wrong here on the detail, but their focus is to hit the target, which is 92% of patients being seen within 18 weeks by the end of the first Labour government,
yeah,
right?
So in 5 years.
They're acknowledging that it might take a bit of time to get there, but yeah, specified where they couldn't specify before. And I guess in fairness, the party have said that they will continue to do that as the campaign progresses and the manifesto is calm, as all the parties have said.
Alex, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
And Nick, I have found myself agreeing with you.
I was going to say I mostly just agree with Nick.
I agree with Adam, I agree with Alex, I agree with Chris. I agree with everyone, really.
Oh, so agree on the law.
Yeah. I agree with Newscast.
Well, I agree to stay up late and watch Newsnight. And that's all from this episode of Newscast. We actually have an extra extra stuff will be in the podcast edition, which you can listen to on BBC Sounds. And we will see you again very soon. Bye-bye.
Newscast from BBC.
Hello, it's been another day of heavy downpours for some parts of the UK. I think they will become fewer and further between as we head towards the weekend. And even today, some of us got to see some sunshine. Gorgeous scenes there for a weather watcher in Whitstable in Kent. But this area of low pressure is still close by, so there is a bit more rain to come. In fact, this little weather feature bringing some really heavy downpours southwards across Scotland and then getting down to parts of northern England as we head on through the night. We will also see some showers for Northern Ireland, pushing down into Wales and the southwest of England. But many other areas starting tomorrow morning on a dry note. Temperatures around 9, 10 or 11 degrees. So into tomorrow morning, this band of cloud and rain. Quite heavy bursts of rain still, pushing southwards across northern England, down into Wales, into the Midlands, East Anglia, and then getting down towards the south coast, where it'll break up into some sharp and perhaps thundery showers, more cloud and rain for this east coast of England. That will make it feel quite disappointing, particularly when combined with the strength of the winds. Further west, not as many showers, more dry weather, some spells of sunshine, and temperatures perhaps getting up to around 19 and possibly 20 degrees in sheltered spots. Now, as we move out of Thursday into Friday, the focus shifts from this area of low pressure, which starts to roll away eastwards, the focus shifting to this area of high pressure, just starting to build in from the west. Now, still clouds and some showery rain across some eastern counties of England, but further north and west, it should be largely dry. Spells of sunshine, a bit more cloud here as well into the northwest of Scotland, maybe only 14 degrees to storm away, but with some sunshine. Glasgow, we get to 19 in Cardiff as well. Some spots likely to get to 20 degrees. And this area of high pressure still with us as we head into the weekend, but with some fairly large areas of cloud circulating around it, so it won't always be sunny. On Saturday, it does look like we'll see quite a lot of cloud across parts of England, maybe into Wales, and another bank of cloud trying Northern Ireland and the northwest of Scotland. But where we do see some sunshine, temperatures are doing quite nicely, 20 up to 21 degrees. As we head into the second half of the weekend, I think similar temperatures, high teens, low 20s Celsius, a fair amount of cloud at times, but still with some spells of sunshine.
Oh, God's sake. What's gone wrong?
From Burnley to Buckingham Palace, from war zones to Washington, D.C., I've had tough conversations with some brilliant people that have just transformed my outlook. I always want to bring different voices together to create a safe space for open debate where differing worldviews can be heard and challenged without breaking the trust of those who tell us their stories. I'm Christian Fraser, on the context for BBC News.
The future is already here.
All about AI changing our jobs.
Where do you see this technology moving in the future?
The flipping burger robot.
From gadgets to gaming.
The virtual reality landscape has changed a bit.
You're the best for everyone. Sustainability to AI.
By using giant nets and AI robots to deal with plastic pollution.
This technology is being tested.
Yay! I'm enjoying it.
Yes, it's good. The latest development from the world of tech.
I could come up with a date predicting when you would die.
This is actually a floating solar farm, and it's a pretty impressive sight.
I think it's quite cool.
Wow! That was right through me!
Click. Watch on BBC iPlayer.
And you're watching The Context here on BBC News.
The winding road to polling day still has plenty around the corner, and where every announcement prompts a flurry of reaction as each party seeks to undermine the others.
This has been a closely fought election, and that's because the ANC's record in government over the past 30 years is being questioned.
In November, on the territory in which I'm standing, US territory, there'll be a choice between Trump and Biden. And behind me, in a few days' time, Mexico
Mexicans will also have their choice.
Well, 2024 is, of course, a year of elections. And here on the context, for the next hour at least, we're taking you around the globe as we look at some of the key votes coming up. We'll start with here in the UK as campaigning is in full swing as we head towards that July 4th. So tonight, in the last few minutes, polls have closed in South Africa, capital for all the reaction as we wait on those results. We're also live in Mexico near the US border. It's election day in Mexico on Sunday, and immigration is set to be a big issue for voters. And of course, there's an election in the US. That's later this year, but before all of that, all eyes remain on Donald Trump. The jury's begun deliberations in his hush money trial in New York. Guilty or not guilty, whatever happens, it'll have huge ramifications on November's vote. Well, we begin tonight with the latest from the campaign trail here in the UK. Labour's been attempting to focus its efforts on the NHS with plans for hospitals to do more out-of-hours work and use the private sector to tackle England's NHS waiting lists. But the attention has also been firmly on the party's handling of Diane Abbott. There's still confusion tonight over whether the long-serving Labour MP can or can't stand again in the general election. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, says there's no decision about that yet. But Diane Abbott says she's banned and has doubled down tonight at a rally in her constituency in Hackney.
I was shocked to learn yesterday that I am going to be banned from running for the Labour Party. I have been selected by my local party members, many of whom are here today, but the National Party is insisting that I be banned. They haven't communicated with me personally. They haven't given a reason for banning me. They just want me excluded from Parliament.
Well, Diane Abbott signed off her speech by saying that she wanted to remain the MP for her constituency for as long as possible, but she didn't address the issue of whether she'd run as an independent. Well, our correspondent Joe Pike pressed her on that issue as she left that event.
Will you stand as an independent candidate in this election, Diane? Will you stand as an independent?
Will she or won't she? Well, we still don't know. There's lots of unknowns in all of this. I'm joined now, I'm pleased to say, by our correspondent Nick Eardley, who's been at that event in Hackney for us. So, Nick, what do we know and what don't we know when it comes to what's happening with Diane Abbott and her candidacy?
Well, we don't know exactly what's happened here. There are competing stories between Keir Starmer and Diane Abbott. What we do know is there's an almighty row taking place between factions of the Labour Party, and it's completely overshadowed their campaign today. And what Diane Abbott's done tonight at Hackney Town Hall, just part of her constituency, is say publicly what she's been saying privately today, which is she thinks she's been banned from standing for the seat that she's held for 37 years. She's blaming the leadership. She's saying the leadership just doesn't want her in Parliament. And she's making it absolutely clear she does want to stand. It's interesting because, Richard, there's been a sort of rumour doing the rounds for a few weeks now that Labour was trying to work on a deal which would allow Diane Abbott back into the party, give her the whip back, but on the expectation that she would then call it a day in this general election. She doesn't sound like she wants to stand down at all when she said that she'll stay the MP here for as long as possible. So, it feels to me two things. Firstly, she's left the door open to standing as an independent MP, even though she's not engaging with that question tonight. Secondly, it feels like this story is just going to run and run and run until there's to Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, was asked about this afternoon. He said it was wrong to say that Ms Abbott had been barred for standing for Parliament for the Labour Party. I've checked in with his team tonight, asked if there are any updates. They say no, that's still the position from their perspective. But until it's resolved, the questions aren't going to go away, and that is going to be tricky for Labour, because it means some of the factionalism that Keir Starmer has tried to stamp out is going to continue to be in the headline.
Okay, Nick Eardley in Hackney at that event where Diane Abbott has just finished speaking. Thank you very much. The Conservatives and Rishi Sunak been in southwest England today. He said his party would replace what he described as rip-off university degrees and fund 100,000 more apprenticeships instead. The southwest of England is a key battleground for the Conservatives. Our political editor has been following the PM on his campaign train today. He sent us this report from Devon.
Bodmin in Cornwall, 1 week into the general election campaign. And the verdict from some folk here?
It's okay, really. I think it's a good idea to have it.
They're looking for your vote, of course, but I just think they're fighting with each other and it's ridiculous.
What do you make of the whole election fun and games?
It's a total nightmare. I can't bear it. I cannot watch television.
It's just dreadful.
You can't be telling me you're not watching television.
I'm trying not to.
Claims and policies, trains and yet more trains. The Prime Minister arriving in Zants this morning, not looking too rough after a night on the sleeper from London. First stop, a rail maintenance depot to talk up his idea on apprenticeships in England.
A future Conservative government will take the bold action of closing down underperforming university degrees that are letting our young people down, and instead using that money to fund 100,000 new high-quality apprenticeships.
Meet, greet, talk and move on is the rhythm for all the party leaders out and about. It is lunchtime, this is Liscard, and the Prime Minister is arriving at a local broadband company.
I'm going for a bit of an expert
Having a go at other people's jobs, all part of many a visit. And listen out for the generous job offer, depending how things turn out.
That was a perfect slide, so if you're looking for a job,
The winding road to the 4th of July polling day still has plenty around the corner, and where every announcement prompts a flurry of reaction as each party seeks to undermine the others.
Our message that the Conservatives let people down in the West Country over the health service, over the economy, over things like sewage in the rivers and on our beaches is resonating.
The Conservatives have to say, if they're going to announce any policy, how they're going to pay for it. That's what we deliver in the Labour Party, fully funded, fully costed policies, and that's what we expect from the Conservatives.
Of course, in this general election campaign, it's really the cost of the union that's on the table. We've got a cost of living crisis inflicted by Westminster, we've got challenges in relation to Brexit, and of course austerity policies.
The Prime Minister's made quite a thing of projecting a certain energy. He's hurtled around England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland the first couple of days. Now he's here in the southwest of England, a region teeming with Conservative seats he really needs to cling on to. And after a morning in Cornwall, next, it's Devon. Late this afternoon, Rishi Sunak arrived at Duncan, a military vehicle manufacturer, to talk to members of staff. And, Prime Minister, there's no doubt you're meeting plenty of people out and about. Are you changing many minds?
Well, look, Chris, you can see we're having a conversation here, but I'm determined to talk to as many people as I can across this country over the remaining weeks of this campaign. That's how I started it, and as you've heard, I'm thoroughly enjoying myself. I'm enjoying having conversations with people about the things that matter. Yes, I am changing minds.
The tour for all the party leaders trundles on. Oh, and you can tell the election is getting nearer when you see pictures like this. 5 weeks to go. Chris Mason, BBC News, in Devon.
Well, we can speak to the BBC World UK political correspondent Rob Watson. Chris, they're reporting that the Prime Minister's enjoying himself. I hope you are as well. As we enter the early stages of this election campaign, we've got lots to discuss. Let's kick off with what we were talking about at the start of the which is all about Diane Abbott, a long-serving MP. Lots of questions about whether or not she is going to be able to stand for the Labour Party or whether she'll choose to stand as an independent. But just to remind our viewers, why was she suspended from the Labour Party?
She was suspended. I should say, first of all, Regina, I am enjoying it. Obviously, Chris Mason was enjoying about the elections, getting out on the road. Anyway, she was suspended because she'd said that Jewish people, people with red hair and travellers didn't really experience racism in the same way. They experienced a kind of prejudice, but they didn't experience racism all the time. And that essentially, she'd written that in an article in a newspaper, a national newspaper in the UK, and a sort of disciplinary procedure followed. And that's brought us to where we are now.
And where do you think this leaves the Labour Party on a day where Sir Keir Starmer wanted to focus on his party's plans for the National Health Service, a key issue whenever there's a general election, and now there's been a distraction with this?
Yes, I mean, for a party which is out in front and clearly pursuing a strategy of let's not rock the boat because this is our election to lose if the polls are to be believed, this is not welcome at all. But I suspect, sort of stepping back from it all, if the Labour leadership are confronted with a choice concerning Diane Abbott, and if they have to choose between upsetting more on the left, activists on the left of the party, or upsetting centrist voters as they would see it, I suspect they're going to choose the former, and that's really why Keir Starmer has been, ever since he took over the leadership of the Labour Party from Jeremy Corbyn, it's always erring on the side of upsetting those on the left of the party, because he takes the view that you win elections in this country very much from the centre ground.
Let's talk about the Conservative campaign. We saw Rishi Sunak on that journey. Chris Mason was tagging along today. He's been in the southwest of England. There are a lot of seats that clearly, if you see where he's plotted and he's gone today, they're worried they could potentially lose, as the polls are to be believed.
Quite right, Regina. I mean, the problem that the Conservative Party faces, apart from the obvious one of political gravity and having been in power for 14 years, is that they're in danger of having their vote share nibbled from the right, if I could put it that way, by the Reform Party, which is a pro-Brexit, controlled immigration party, but also, they risk losing votes to the left of centre, either to Labour in large parts of the country, or in the southwest to the Liberal Democrats. So it's just an incredibly difficult spot, a tight spot to be in electorally, but that's where Mr Sunak and his party find themselves.
And of course, we've now had the confirmation of when the first television debate between the leaders will be. It'll be aired on ITV next Tuesday at 9 o'clock. What's your take ahead of that? It's the first one of a number of them.
Well, I'll definitely be watching. It's interesting, the TV debates. They're a relatively new phenomenon. I think they started in 2010, if I remember, in this country. I know people have had them in the US, other countries. And I think the feedback so far is you get lots of people complaining, say, oh, they say all the same things and they're all very tedious. But actually, they get quite high viewing numbers. And people do say that they watch with great interest and that their vote is influenced in some ways. And I'm not sure that they change the outcome. But do they energise politics in this country? Do they get people watching and talking? Yes. And, to go back right to the start of Chris Mason's piece, where you heard from some ordinary voters, you get that sort of sense of the really profound prevailing anti-politics, anti-politician mood, not just the government, but all of them. So, things like debates are a chance for politicians, to try and at least reach out to the voters, distrustful and, rather fed up as they might be.
Okay, Rob Watson, our political correspondent with the very latest. Thank you very much. Now, some developments on a story that we are following in the United States, and as we have been reporting throughout the day, jurors in Donald Trump's historic criminal trial have begun deliberations, and a development that we're hearing from the court is that the judge has said that they have received a note because the juror, one of the jurors I should say, has a question, and what we know is that that note contained 4 requests. We have more information on that on the BBC News live page that you can see there, where my colleague Kyla Epstein is inside the court sending us updates so that we know what's going on. It is typical, of course, when a jury is deliberating, for them to send notes, to clarify and ask questions. What those 4 requests are, we can confirm that as those deliberations in New York have begun on that criminal trial of Donald Trump around hush money allegations, that a note has been received by the judge containing 4 requests, and we'll have more information on that when we get it. Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News. We take you around the world and witness various elections in this hour. So let's take you from elections in the UK straight to South Africa, where the polls have just closed in the country's general election. Now, the vote being seen as the most pivotal in 3 decades. It's considered a test of the ruling ANC, the African National Congress, and their hold on the country. The party of Nelson Mandela, the ANC, has been the majority party in power since the end of apartheid and has held the presidency since then. Include corruption scandals, rising crime and unemployment, as well as frequent power cuts, impact their fortunes. Current leader and President Cyril Ramaphosa cast his ballot in Soweto today, saying he was in no doubt that voters once again back the ANC. Well, let's go live to my colleague Catherine Guarahaga, who's in Soweto with the very latest as the polls have just closed.
Indeed, Regina, this polling station where we are, Alunda West High School in Soweto, really could be seen as a model polling station because it's just gone 9 o'clock, or it's past 9 o'clock here, and this polling station is closed. Party representatives are also inside. They're taking a short break, and then the vote counting will begin here. But what we're hearing from across South Africa is that in some polling stations, there are still hundreds of people waiting to cast their ballots. The Electoral Commission says that if they are in the queue at 9 o'clock, they can then wait and they will still be given the opportunity to cast their ballots. So why does this matter? This matters, of course, in a hotly contested election where the margins could be small, and so making sure that each party gets its voters out voting really does matter. This election is important, of course, as you mentioned there, because there is the prospect that the ANC that has dominated South Africa's politics for 30 years could lose its majority in Parliament. This is also 30 years since the end of apartheid, the dawn of democracy in this country. And this is also a moment that some of those people who didn't live through apartheid are also taking stock of the legacy of the ANC. And we're joined by Gugu Dladla. She's one of the people who are called the Born Frees in South Africa because, of course, you were born in 1994 after the dawn of democracy here in South Africa. This election has been described as something that's historic for the country. How do you see it yourself?
I think, we felt we are left feeling disappointed and failed, and we need a change. That's where right now, yeah.
And what does change mean personally for you? You told me earlier, we spoke when you came to vote earlier today, and you mentioned that you have a child. So what does change, what does the future look like for you?
Better crime, like we just need to have less violence, less crime, less load shedding. I can't be working and minding my child in the darkness. So we need all that change. We can't be having water cartridges in this day and age. I can't be having the same problems that my grandmother had in 2024. So that needs to change.
Yeah, a real change. Thank you very much, Gugu, once again for joining us on BBC News. So that's Gugu Glad. She cast her vote and she talked about change there. That's something that we've heard consistently throughout the day from various voters, people who support the ANC and also those who want to vote for the opposition. So what does this all mean in terms of the final results that we could be seeing out of South Africa today? We're joined by Bluetti Jolobe. He's a politics professor at the University of Cape Town. He joins us from Cape Town. Thank you for joining us here on BBC News. The word change has been mentioned throughout the day, not only on BBC News, but also on the South African media. What do you think it means for the final results and what this could mean for the ANC itself?
Good evening and thanks for having me. I think that there's an expectation that every election is somehow going to produce the kind of result that we'll see either an ANC loss or even the kind of change in the party seat distribution that will make our system a lot more competitive. And I think that the problem with that is that in fact, I would say in the last 20 years or so, there's been no significant impact that parties of opposition have made to dent that deficit between themselves and the ANC. And so even though people have very high expectations as into what this election can achieve, I don't think that the deficit between, say, the ANC and the second largest party, which is the DA, is small enough to warrant us to think that there will be the kind of shift or the kind of change, if you will. And so I think that based on voting patterns in the last 15 years or so, we are expecting more or less a predictable result, but one where there is a reduced ANC share.
And a reduced vote, and just briefly, the ANC is losing votes consistently over the years, but the opposition, as you say, isn't gaining votes. What's happening? Is it that people are just choosing not to come out and vote?
I think the dynamic is one where the swing vote here is huge. So if we take percentages out of it and we look at the actual number of people who are registered, who vote for the ANC, and then those who vote for, say, the second and the third largest party, we have about 27 million people on the voters' roll as of this election. In the last 25 years, the ANC's share of that has already been within a band of, say, 10 and 11 million people. It's never shifted. And then if one looks at the second largest party, which is the DA, it's never been above 3.5 million, which means that the number of people who are not showing up is more than the combined total of all people who vote for, or who don't vote for the ANC. And that also means that the people who don't show up equal the amount of people who vote for the ANC. And so what we have here is less
incredible statistics there, Professor Bluetti Jolobe, those incredible statistics. And of course, as we get those results, we'll be able to unpick them, analyze them. Thank you for joining us here on BBC News. So there you have it, Regini. Polls closing across most polling stations in South Africa. Those results will start coming in overnight, and we'll be bringing them to you here on BBC News.
Catherine, thank you for the moment. Let's show you these pictures. These show Donald Trump walking back into court. We've just heard that the jury, which has been deliberating, has requested to hear and see some evidence again. We'll have more on that after the break, so do stay with us here on The Context.
Hello, it's been another day of heavy downpours for some parts of the UK. I think they will become fewer and further between as we head towards the weekend. And even today, some of us got to see some sunshine. Gorgeous scenes there for a weather watcher in Whitstable in Kent. But this area of low pressure is still close by, so there is a bit more rain to come. In fact, this little weather feature bringing some really heavy downpours southwards across Scotland, and then getting down into parts of northern England as we head on through the night. We will also see some showers for Northern Ireland, pushing down into Wales and the southwest of England, but many other areas starting tomorrow morning on a dry note. Temperatures around 9, 10 or 11 degrees. So into tomorrow morning, this band of cloud and rain, quite heavy bursts of rain still, pushing southwards across northern England, down into Wales, into the Midlands, East Anglia, and then getting down towards the south coast, where it will break up into some sharp and perhaps thundery showers. More cloud and rain for this east coast of England. That will make it feel quite disappointing, particularly when combined with the strength of the winds. Further west, not as many showers, more dry weather, some spells of sunshine, and temperatures perhaps getting up to around 19 or possibly 20 degrees in sheltered spots. Now, as we move out of Thursday into Friday, the focus shifts from this area of low pressure, which starts to roll away eastwards, the focus shifting to this area of high pressure, just starting to build in from the west. Now, still clouds and some showery rain across some eastern counties of England, but further north and west it should be largely dry, spells of sun, a bit more cloud here as well into the northwest of Scotland, maybe only 14 degrees for Stornoway, but given some sunshine, Glasgow, we get to 19 in Cardiff as well, some spots likely to get to 20 degrees. And this area of high pressure still with us as we head into the weekend, but with some fairly large areas of cloud circulating around it, so it won't always be sunny. On Saturday, it does look like we'll see quite a lot of cloud across parts of England, maybe into Wales, and another bank of cloud trying to roll into Northern Ireland and the northwest of Scotland. But where we do see some sunshine, temperatures doing quite nicely, 20, that's up to 24 degrees. And as we head into the second half of the weekend, I think similar temperatures, high teens, low 20s Celsius, a fair amount of cloud at times, but still with some spells of sunshine.
What does it take to become a top opera star like tenor Jonas Kaufmann, Welsh-based baritone Sabrina Tarbell, and Greek-American soprano Maria Callas? I'm on a mission to find out how opera is trying to attract new audiences and reinvent itself.
I think music has the power to change the world.
Take me to the opera. Watch on BBC iPlayer.
It's the first US presidential rematch in almost 70 years, with the polls suggesting it will be a tight race decided by narrow margins. Get the latest headlines in the BBC News app. Get in-depth coverage from this historic election campaign on bbc.co.uk/news. Follow the story of the US election with BBC News.
I'm sure I've actually said this before. I came up there and I cried. Wow.
A symbol of friendship to some and of diplomacy to others.
That world has eaten up and spit out a lot of young and attractive guys.
There's always more to the story with our podcasts. Listen on BBC Sounds.
Hello, I'm Regina Vibinard, and you're watching The Context on BBC News. Jurors in Donald Trump's hush money trial have begun their deliberations, but in the last few minutes, the jury's requested to look at some of the evidence again. We'll be live in New York at the courtroom in a moment, but first let's get a roundup of the sport. Let's go straight to Mark at the Sports Centre.
Thank you very much, Regini. Well, we're going to start at the French Open, where an absolutely enthralling contest between defending champion and world #1 Iga Świątek and quadruple Grand Slam winner Naomi Osaka went the distance. In a tense first set was the informed Świątek with 4 titles to her name already this season, who took it on a tiebreak before Osaka came roaring back, dominating the second, overpowering her opponent to take it 6-1. The third set, a nail biter. Świątek 4-1 down, seemingly out, somehow survived break points, even a match point to take the set 7-5. She's now won 16 consecutive singles matches at Roland Garros, the dream of achieving 3 in a row at the French Open, alive and well. Over on the men's side, Carlos Alcaraz needed to dig deep to beat inspired qualifier Jasper de Jong and reach the French Open third round. The Spaniard looked subdued at times in a 6-3, 6-4, 2-6 player ranked 173 places below him. Rusty performance from the two-time Grand Slam winner, who twice had to come from a breakdown in the fourth set. In the end, though, doing what he had to do.
He dominated the most of the points in the third set, and it was struggling to get to my good tennis, or the tennis that I was playing in the first and the second set. And then in the I had to fight. I had to overcome the problems that I had most of the time with myself. But really happy that I could get the win in a good way at the end.
Matches against world #1 Scotty Scheffler have been dropped following his arrest at the USPGA Championship earlier this month. The American arrested outside Valhalla Golf Club while trying to navigate hours before his second round at the tournament. The charges included reckless driving and disregarding traffic signals.
It's obvious he didn't do anything wrong. And as I've said repeatedly, the more evidence that comes out, the more it shows that Scott was a victim. And I think everybody sees something like this happen and realizes they're one wrong turn or running into the wrong person away from going to jail themselves.
That's the final of the Europa Conference League. Olympiacos trying to become the first Greek side of the European club competition. They're up against Fiorentina, the Italian side, the runners-up in the competition last year. It's been an end-to-end game, rather raucous atmosphere in Athens. Fiorentina probably coming closest, taking the lead. Nikola Milenkovic stuffing a shot past the keeper from the corner. And ruled it out for offside. We've got 32 minutes on the clock. Still nil though. That's that time of the year, the off-season managerial merry-go-round. This one from Burnley to Bavaria. Vincent Kompany has been appointed Bayern Munich head coach on a 3-year deal. Former Manchester City captain retired from playing in 2020. He moved from Anderlecht to manage Burnley in 2022 and then guided them to promotion to the Premier League last year in his first season in charge. And the Clarets, though, did suffer relegation from the top flight in May after finishing 19th. Barcelona have confirmed Hansi Flick as their new manager on a 2-year term. Ends months of uncertainty at the club. 9-year-old former Germany manager takes over from Xavi, who was sacked last week. Finally, a stunning century from Nat Sciver-Brunt helped England thrash Pakistan in the third one-day international. At Chelmsford, the all-rounder struck an unbeaten 124 to take England to 302 for 5, and that was always too much for Pakistan. Could only reach 124 for 9, and with captain unable to bat, they lost by 78 runs. The Bruns also picked up 2 wickets. And that's all sport for now. Back to you, Regina.
Let's bring you some breaking news on the ongoing criminal trial against the former US President Donald Trump. Now, we show you these pictures from the last few moments where you can see Mr. Trump and his entourage returning back to the courtroom. Now, that is because the court is now sitting again. That is after the jury sent a note to the judge containing 4 requests. Well, we can go straight to our correspondent, Neda Tawfiq, who is outside the courtroom there in Manhattan, to explain what exactly is going on. So, Neda, as we know in these kind of cases, it is normal for a jury to make requests, ask for clarifications. What exactly are they asking for in this case?
Yeah, that's right, Regini. It's often a sign of how seriously jurors are taking their responsibility. And they've been deliberating for about 4 hours now. And a short while ago, as you mentioned, the buzzer went off and they had a note for the judge asking for additional pieces of asking for pieces of testimony. 3 of which they want from David Pecker, the former publisher of the tabloid The National Enquirer. They want to take a closer look at a meeting that he held with Donald Trump and Michael Cohen in August of 2015 in Trump Tower, and exactly what he said in his testimony during that meeting. Remember, that meeting is where prosecutors said that David Pecker discussed the so-called catch and kill scheme with Donald Trump's campaign to buy up and kill negative stories about Trump to help him get into the White House. Now, they also want to see Michael Cohen's testimony from that same meeting, perhaps to compare what the two have said. They also want 2 other pieces from David Pecker, a phone call that he had with Donald Trump and a discussion he had about buying the former Playboy model Karen McDougal's life rights and ultimately then not selling that to Donald Trump because of advice from his legal counsel. So remember, prosecutors have described David Pecker as somebody whose testimony was incredibly damaging and stands on its own. This is somebody who was the first witness to speak in this trial, who really laid the groundwork for the prosecution's case. So, Regini, the process now is underway to get the jurors those transcripts, and then deliberations will continue.
Okay, Neda Tawfiq joining us live from that courtroom in Manhattan. We'll be back with you when we get more developments, but for the moment, thanks to Neda. Now, just a reminder that Mr. Trump is facing 34 counts of falsifying business records, allegedly to cover up a hush money payment to the adult film star Stormy Daniels in the final weeks of the 2016 election. Now, he's denied the allegations from the start. This trial is just one of a number of cases against the former president. He's also facing probes relating to his handling of classified documents, a case related to the January 6th storming of the Capitol building, and connected to the 2020 presidential contest in the state of Georgia, as well as a civil case in New York. Well, someone who's been following the trial closely is former federal prosecutor and professor at the Cardozo School of Law, Jessica Ross. Jessica, welcome to BBC. First of all, I'd like to get your reaction to the developments that we've just been hearing from my colleague Neda. That is that the jury is asking to review some of the testimony again.
Yes, that's a very interesting development. It doesn't surprise me. The jury would like to read back the testimony of David Pecker, who is one of the most important witnesses for the prosecution, because he tells the story of the so-called catch and kill scheme to prevent stories that were negative for Donald Trump from coming to light in the weeks before the November 2016 election. David Pecker was a very important witness, not only because he tells that story, but because he corroborates Michael Cohen's testimony about that catch and kill scheme, and specifically Trump's involvement in it. So he critically corroborates Michael Cohen when he says that Trump was involved in that scheme. And unlike Michael Cohen, David Pecker far less bias against Donald Trump. He testified that he still considers Donald Trump a friend. There's far less baggage associated with David Pecker. He may not be a perfect witness, but again, he has far less baggage than Michael Cohen. He doesn't have prior convictions. He hasn't made inconsistent statements in the past. And again, he still considers Donald Trump a friend.
And Jessica, I mean, this has been quite the trial. 22 witnesses over 6 weeks. We also heard from the adult film star Stormy Daniels. We've had mentions of pajamas and all kinds of things. What's your overall assessment as we wait for those deliberations of how this trial has gone for both the prosecution and the defence?
I think the prosecution's case came in well. I think that notwithstanding the fact that there were some sordid details, primarily through the testimony of Stormy Daniels, that the prosecution, by and large, checked all the boxes that it needed to check in terms of the elements of the offense that it had been charged. The weakest part of the prosecution's case, in my opinion, is the connection of Donald Trump to the falsification of the records of the Trump Organization, which of course is the heart of this case. The charges are 34 counts of falsification of business records. So even if the jury finds that Trump was involved in the catch and kill scheme and that the payments to kill her story were actually in furtherance of his campaign, the jury still needs to find that the business records of the Trump Organization were falsified to conceal that payment to Stormy Daniels, and that Trump was connected to, intentionally, a part of the scheme to falsify the records. And that's where Michael Cohen's testimony is least corroborated by testimony of other witnesses.
And Jessica, it's a question that many people have been asking on the BBC News website Q&A that we've been running on our live page today. But I'm going to ask you for your assessment of this as well. If Donald Trump is found guilty, what are the odds that he could end up behind bars?
Well, most defendants convicted of the crime that's been charged here, who have no prior criminal record, would not be sentenced to prison. Although prison is authorized as a sentence here, up to 4 years imprisonment, that is not a required sentence. In fact, no prison sentence at all is required. And so, generally speaking, somebody in the position of being convicted of this crime with no prior record would not face prison time. But that is not to say that the judge does not have discretion to impose a prison sentence. He could. And so I think that we should not predict exactly what is going to happen here.
We can never predict with American politics, can we, Jessica? Jessica Roth, professor and former federal prosecutor, thank you very much. Well, if you want to keep getting a live update on what's happening in that courtroom in New York, you can scan the QR code that's on the screen beside me. That will take you to the BBC live page where our reporters and correspondents in the courtroom.
Oh, for fuck's sake, tripping up wires.
On the context around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News. Now let's get the latest on what
I did trip up a wire just now. Tripped up a wire just now, look, I picked it up, look, move it over, that's it, like that. Move it out the way, then I won't trip up it. Fucking hell, man, what are you doing?
And is not intended to harm civilians. An emergency security council recently said at the US, New York, and America's deputy ambassador
Tub of ice cream there, look.
said into the
Alright, don't go anywhere near the wire.
Make sure you move it right out the way. I don't do it.
Palestinian civilians.
Maybe move it over a
And
bit
more
more.
than 200 individuals were seriously injured.
Oh, the ice cream, look.
Following an Israeli airstrike.
Taking the ice cream up, cunt.
Words cannot capture the sense of loss to families whose lives were shattered by this tragic incident.
Well, for more on this, we can go live to Washington and join our State Department correspondent, Tom Bateman. Tom, just bring us up to date on what the US position is when it comes to what happened in Rafah at the weekend, and of course, how that changes the already changing dynamic of the US-Israel relationship.
Yeah, so
Sorry, Virginia, I had a few problems with the sound there. But what we heard March from President Biden, you may well remember, was quite a significant intervention where he basically laid out what he said was his red line, as he defined it, over the issue of Rafah. And this was that he said that if there was a full-scale offensive by the Israelis into the city, that he couldn't and wouldn't support it. And that is because there were at that point 1.4 million displaced Palestinians, mostly living in tents there already. So as we've seen over recent weeks, Israel moving into Rafah, then that appalling event, of course, on Sunday, where an Israeli airstrike triggered a fire that killed at least 45 people, burning to their deaths in tents in that encampment there. Over the last couple of days, we've seen the US administration ask repeatedly, did this cross President Biden's red line? Would there now be a change of policy, a change in support for the Israeli actions in Rafah? And the answer has been no. There will be no change of policy.
Oh, I don't know why not getting a signal was in weekend.
Was he talked about the
Why is it not getting a signal?
that emerged from that strike on Sunday.
5G, yes,
the Israelis now had to weigh up whether what he described as incremental bomb, because many or most of the conditions defined by the Israelis.
For some reason it's on 5G, I don't know why it was on 5G. Hopefully it'll work better now.
He said that at this stage he basically didn't know. He said that the Israelis haven't supplied
It still works anyway.
Americans about this. It comes back to that basic issue here, which is that America is the biggest supplier during this conflict. President Biden
On this.
From
I just have to leave it like that.
Backlash from the Israelis themselves, from Republicans in Washington, and then the administration's really sort of continued to underscore its commitment to the Israelis.
Okay, John Bateman, our State Department correspondent in Washington, thank you very much for taking us through the list. Well, as we've been saying, it's a programme packed with elections this evening. We've already discussed the UK and South Africa. Now, as promised, let's head to Mexico, where voters go to the polls on Sunday in the largest elections in the country's history. Mexicans will be casting ballots for more than 20,000 positions, including the president and all members of the House and Senate. One of the main issues people around the world will be watching is Mexico's relationship with the United States and the situation on the border. Thousands of people cross the border into the US illegally every day, often in extremely treacherous conditions. Some of those making that journey say they're escaping persecution in their home countries, but their arrival into the US has long been a thorny issue for American politicians, one likely to dominate the US election campaign. Well, our correspondent James Reynolds has been to the Californian desert on the border, and he sent us this report.
This is the border area between Mexico and the United States. And if you look on a map, you'll see that the border between the two countries extends for what, about 2,000 miles, 3,000 kilometers, and there are cities along the American side. But it is only when you get here, when you stand right here in the desert, under the sun, almost all alone, that you realize just how dangerous it is to be trying to make this crossing. It is easy to get lost here, to run out of water, simply not to know which way to turn, to get confused by the shrubland, not knowing which way is Mexico and which way is the United States. And the dangers of this journey are shown by what happened here to one man. He was trying to build a life for him and his wife and his 4 kids. He broke his leg on the journey, and he died not far from me here in the shade of a small bridge. This border has become an election campaign point on both sides, both for Mexico and also for the United States. It will be debated and discussed as those 2 elections approach, the first in June and the second in November.
An incredible watch there, which gives you a sense of the scale. Well, James joins me now. He's in Tijuana for us. James, it was really staggering to see the scale there, even in just a small portion of where you are. Just tell us who you've been speaking to in the last few days and what they've been saying to you. You told us one story just then of one man who lost his life making that crossing.
And I spoke to an American group, a volunteer group, who help those migrants attempting to cross the border. They said they're under very specific laws in the United States. They're not allowed to guide them to shelter. They're allowed to point them to the food and to the drink that this organization, the volunteer organization, leaves on the ground for them, but are not allowed to do anything more than that, or else they would risk falling foul of federal trafficking laws. They said that people should be allowed to cross the border to get from here, Mexico, where I'm speaking to you from, across the border into the United States for a better life. But that is not a view that's shared by everyone across the border in the United States. There was a baseball game last night, so I spoke to plenty of fans on the way into the game, asking them what did they make of their relationship with Mexico and their thoughts on migration. A lot of the Americans I spoke to said Mexico is a great place to come to for a break. I asked about migration. Some of them said people should come. Migration is the lifeblood of what any country needs. But I was struck by the fact that many of the others I spoke to as they were arriving for the game said you have to differentiate between legal migration, as they saw it on the one side, which they believe should happen, and illegal migration, which many of them said should not happen. And of course, that is an election point in November in the United States.
James, I'm remembering the time when I was in America and I met a 7-year-old boy who crossed the Rio Grande on his own to make what we've said was an incredibly treacherous journey. One thing that's often talked about around this are the cartels and the gangs and the violence at the border that also is all wrapped up into this.
Yes, for Mexicans approaching this election and for those migrants inside this country, violence or security is pretty much the central issue. Now, security is such a dry word, Regina, isn't it? But it really means this. Can you get to have dinner with your family that night without worrying about what will happen to your family members if you're a Mexican? And if you're a migrant, can you get to where you want to get to without the threat of cartels or other gangs making your life incredibly dangerous, incredibly difficult? As soon as we finish speaking to you and to a few other BBC colleagues, we're going to go and speak to some migrants themselves who are at a shelter here in Tijuana. And one of the most important points is that they come from different countries. Some of them come from this region, from other countries in Central America, or the Caribbean, or Venezuela, which has been hit by economic collapse in recent years. But other migrants have come from other conflicts in the world, figuring out that their best route to a better life, as they would see it, comes through using this highway in Mexico, this migrant highway in Mexico, be they escaping from Afghanistan or Pakistan and trying to reach the United States.
James Reynolds, thanks for all of your reporting on this issue, and you can listen to James's coverage as well on his programme Outside Source on the BBC World Service. Let's take you back to New York, a reminder of a developing story that's coming from the courtroom there. Now, jurors in Donald Trump's historic criminal trial began deliberations, but now everyone's returned to the courtroom. That's after the jury asked to see some of the testimony and the transcripts once again. You can see more of the details on the updates there on the BBC News live page there. And we know that it is typical, of course, for a jury to ask for clarifications and questions. We don't know how long that's going to take, but just to confirm, the jury has requested to see some of the evidence again. There's the scene live at the courtroom. Not too long ago, we saw Donald Trump and his entourage, including one of his sons, return to the courtroom as everybody has been called back as that evidence is shared once again. I'm Regina Vigenarden. You're watching The Context. Please stay with us.
Hello, it's been another day of heavy downpours for some parts of the UK. I think they will become fewer and further between as we head towards the weekend. And even today, some of us got to see some sunshine. Gorgeous scenes there for a weather watcher in Whitstable in Kent. But this area of low pressure is still close by, so there is a bit more rain to come. In fact, this little weather feature bringing some really heavy downpours southwards across Scotland, and then getting down into parts of northern England as we head on through the night. We will also see some showers for Northern Ireland, pushing down into Wales and the southwest of England, but many other areas starting tomorrow morning on a dry note. Temperatures around 9, 10 or 11 degrees. So into tomorrow morning, this band of cloud and rain, quite heavy bursts of rain still, pushing southwards across northern England, down into Wales, into the Midlands, East Anglia, and then getting down towards the south coast, where it will break up into some sharp and perhaps thundery showers. More cloud and rain for this east coast of England. That will make it feel quite disappointing, particularly when combined with the strength of the winds. Further west, not as many showers, more dry weather, some spells of sunshine, and temperatures perhaps getting up to around 19 or possibly 20 degrees in sheltered spots. Now, as we move out of Thursday into Friday, the focus shifts from this area of low pressure, which starts to roll away eastwards, the focus shifting to this area of high pressure, just starting to build in from the west. Now, still clouds and some showery rain across some eastern counties of England. But further north and west, it should be largely dry. Spells of sunshine, a bit more cloud here as well into the northwest of Scotland. Maybe only 14 degrees for Stornoway, but given some sunshine, Glasgow can get to 19 in Cardiff as well. Some spots likely to get to 20 degrees. And this area of high pressure still with us as we head into the weekend, but with some fairly large areas of cloud circulating around it. So it won't always be sunny. On Saturday, it does look like we'll see quite a lot of cloud across parts of England, maybe into Wales, and another bank of cloud trying to roll into Northern Ireland and the northwest of Scotland. But where we do see some sunshine, temperatures are doing quite nicely, 20, perhaps up to 21 degrees. As we head into the second half of the weekend, I think similar temperatures, high teens, low 20s Celsius, a fair amount of cloud at times, but still with some spells of sunshine.
Morning. Come and have a seat. And of course, I'm not going to go easy on you. There are some really big questions we've got to try and get answers to this morning. But I'll be fair, and we just want to hear what you've got to say. So, shall we get on with it? There we go. Join me to hear from the biggest names inside and outside politics.
Sunday with Laura Koonsberg. Sundays at 9 on BBC One and iPlayer.
For now, it's a defensive position and can only be activated if the militia attack.
They are proud of their democracy, but they also fear it's now under threat from China like never before.
Every time the government drops tear gas, people disperse and the farmers come back.
When you're this close to the river, which is a front line, you are always watched, so you have to move quickly.
There when the story breaks. BBC News. Follow on the app.
I'm Regina Vidin-Arden. You're watching The Context on BBC News.
I'm going to work very hard every single day to earn your trust. And you know what? I don't think you, the British people, like being taken for granted.
That's the choice. More of this chaos and decline we've had for 14 years. Heaven knows what they'll do if they get another 5 years. Or move forward with Labour.
The winding road to polling day still has plenty around the corner, and where every announcement prompts a flurry of reaction as each party seeks to undermine the others.
The election's in full swing, and on my panel tonight I'm joined by Martin Shipton, the Nation Cymru Associate Editor in Wales, Lucy Fisher, the Financial Times' Whitehall Editor, Nadine Batchelor-Hunt, the political reporter from Politics Home in Birmingham, and here with me in the studio, Chris Morris, the CEO of Full Fact. It's a British charity which checks and corrects fact reporting in the news and social media. In the last hour, the jury in Donald Trump's hush money trials requested some further evidence after they began deliberations. The former president's now close to learning his fate after becoming the first American president to face a criminal trial. The polls have now closed in South Africa's general election, the vote being seen as the most pivotal in 3 decades and is considered a test of the ruling ANC, the African National Congress's hold on the country. The Dutch authorities are investigating the death of a person who fell into the spinning turbine blades of a departing passenger jet at Amsterdam's Schiphol airport. The death occurred outside the busy hub's terminal as a KLM flight was ready to depart for Billund in Denmark. And more breaking news that a father and son from Cheshire are missing after a hill walking trip in the Scottish Highlands. Tom Parry and his 12-year-old son Richie were due to return home on Wednesday after they visited Glen Nevis in Glencoe. But Police Scotland confirmed their car was found in a car park. There's more on that on the BBC News website. Well, we begin tonight with the latest from the campaign trail here in the UK. The Labour Party's been attempting to focus its efforts on the NHS today, with plans for hospitals to do more out-of-hours work and use the private sector to tackle England's NHS waiting lists. But the attention has been firmly on the party's handling of Diane Abbott. There's still confusion tonight over whether the long-serving Labour MP can or can't stand again in the general election. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, says there's no decision about that yet. But Diane Abbott says she's banned and has doubled down tonight at a rally that she appeared at in her constituency in Hackney.
I was shocked to learn yesterday that I am going to be banned from running for the Labour Party. I have been selected by my local party members, many of whom are here today, but the National Party is insisting that I be banned. They haven't communicated with me personally. They haven't given a reason for banning me. They just want me excluded from Parliament.
Well, Diane Abbott signed off her speech by saying that she wanted to remain the MP for her constituency for as long as possible. But she didn't address the issue of whether she stands as an independent. Well, our correspondent Joe Pike pressed her on that issue as she left the event.
Will you stand as an independent candidate in this election, Diane Abbott? Will you stand as an independent?
Well, there you have it, Diane Abbott going into a car as she left that speech that she gave earlier at her constituency in Hackney. Well, I'm joined now by my panel. A reminder, it's Martin Shipton from The Nation Cymru, the associate editor there, joining us from Wales. Lucy Fisher, the Financial Times Whitehall editor. Nadine Batchelor-Hunt, political reporter for Politics Home in Birmingham. And joining me here in the studio, Chris Morris, formerly BBC, now CEO of Full Fact. That's a British charity which checks and corrects facts reported in the news and on social media. Welcome to all of you. I'll start with you, Martin. This was all about the Labour Party setting out its plans for the NHS, which is always a key election issue. Now, it's somewhat been diverted by this ongoing drama over what will happen to Diane Abbott and her role in the party.
Well, absolutely. I think many people will be very concerned about the way that Diane Abbott has been treated. She's obviously been a very loyal member of the Labour Party in Westminster for approaching 40 years and has got an enormous amount of respect. I mean, she was the first black woman MP who was elected, and therefore she has that totemic significance, which I think many people look to, and she is seen by many people in ethnic minority communities and beyond, actually, as something of a role model. And she has found herself tied up in a very protracted situation, which arose out of, what I think we would all probably agree was an unwise comment that she made. But the way in which the Labour Party has treated her and the way in which the Labour Party has delayed in making a determination about what should happen to her as a consequence of what she said, quite a little while ago now, and for which she did apologise, is really, I think, emblematic of something which is obviously significant in her case, but is something bigger as well, because there have been a number of instances where people on the left of the party have felt that they've been victimised by those who are running the Labour Party now, people who surround Keir Starmer. And there are a number of instances that have occurred in Wales and elsewhere, where you could say, actually, that if people had been on the right of the party, they may not have been treated as harshly as Diana Abbott has been. So I think that's a general concern about what will happen if and when the Labour Party is in power and is the governing party.
Okay, Martin, I'm going to stop you there because there's a lot of other people who obviously want to jump in as well. Thank you for your thoughts on that. Nadine, I'm going to bring you in on this next. Obviously, this is about an MP in London. You report from Birmingham. How much do you think this is an issue that translates nationally as well, the way that many people see Diana Abbott's treatment by the Labour Party?
So obviously there's a big black population in London and in Diana's constituency, where I'm currently in Birmingham, and there's also obviously a big black community there. I think the bigger impact is probably going to be on generally people to the left of Labour, and people in the party who see themselves as quite strongly socialist, and probably closer to the politics of potentially Jeremy Corbyn than Keir Starmer. And of course, people who are about anti-racist, they will see this as an unacceptable, the way these events have played out as completely unacceptable. It is, as as a political journalist watching this, it is bizarre to see Labour kind of tie themselves up in knots on this when they had the perfect opportunity to resolve the situation with Diana Abbott, when the comments that Tory donor made about when they called her to be shot and suggested that she made you want to hate all black women, which were absolutely repulsive comments. Labour did criticise the Conservative Party for that, and many people said this was the prime opportunity to welcome Diana back into the party. Now, why they didn't take the opportunity, I don't know. Why it's dragged on as long as it has, I don't know. But rather than them being able to kind of focus on their NHS announcements today, this row over Diana Abbott and this frustration about the briefings and counter briefings and Keir Starmer saying that reports in the press are wrong, it's completely overshadowed what Labour should have been doing, so which is seizing the agenda. So it's just strange to see them doing this, and I think a reminder to them that their operation isn't as slick as potentially they think it is or they want it to be, despite being so far ahead of the polls.
Okay, Nadine, thank you very much. We'll hold that thought the rest of the panel, because we're going to look at what the Conservatives have been doing today. And Rishi Sunak's been in southwest England now. He said his party would replace what he described as rip-off university degrees and fund 100,000 more apprenticeships. Now, the southwest, of course, is a key battleground for the Conservative Party in this election. And our political editor Chris Mason has been travelling with the Prime Minister on the campaign trail today. He sent us this report.
Bodmin in Cornwall, 1 week into the general election campaign. And the verdict from some folk here?
It's okay, really. I think it's a good idea to have it.
They're looking for your vote, of course, but I just think they're fighting with each other and it's ridiculous.
What do you make of the whole election fun and games?
It's a total nightmare. I can't bear it. I cannot watch television. It's just dreadful.
You can't be telling me you're not watching television.
I'm trying not to.
Planes and policies, trains and yet more trains. The Prime Minister arriving in Penzance this morning, not looking too rough after a night on the sleeper from London. First stop, a rail maintenance depot to talk up his idea on apprenticeships in England.
A future Conservative government will take the bold action of closing down underperforming university degrees that are letting our young people down, and instead using that money to fund 100,000 new high-quality apprenticeships. Oh, literally 2 weeks ago.
Meet, greet, talk and move on is the rhythm for all the party leaders out and about. It's lunchtime, this is Liscard, and the Prime Minister is arriving at a local broadband company.
a bit of an expert anyway.
Having a go at other people's jobs, all part of many a visit. And listen out for the generous job offer, depending how things turn out.
Yeah, that was a perfect slice if you're looking for a job at
Very The winding road to the 4th of July polling day still has plenty around the corner, and where every announcement prompts a flurry of reaction as each party seeks to undermine the others.
Our message that the Conservatives let people down in the West Country over the health service, over the economy, over things like sewage in the rivers and on our beaches is resonating with people.
The Conservatives have to say, if they're going to announce any policy, how they're going to pay for it. That's what we deliver in the Labour Party, fully funded, fully costed policies, and that's what we expect from the Conservatives.
Of course, in this general election campaign, it's really the cost of the union that's on the table. We've got a cost of living crisis inflicted by Westminster, we've got challenges in relation to Brexit, and of course austerity policies.
The Prime Minister's made quite a thing of projecting a certain energy. He's hurtled around England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland the first couple of days. Now he's here in the southwest of England, a region teeming with Conservative seats he really needs to cling on to. And after a morning in Cornwall, next it's Devon. Late this afternoon, Rishi Sunak arrived in Dunkerswell at a military vehicle manufacturer to talk to members of staff and to reporters. Prime Minister, there's no doubt you're meeting plenty of people out and about, but are you changing many minds?
Well, look, Chris, you can see we're having a conversation here, but I'm determined to talk to as many people as I can across this country over the remaining weeks of this campaign. That's how I started it, and as you've heard, I'm thoroughly enjoying myself. I'm enjoying having conversations with people about the things that matter. Yes, I am changing minds.
The tour for all the party leaders trundles on. Oh, and you can tell the election is getting nearer when you see pictures like this. 5 weeks to go. Chris Mason, BBC News, in Devon.
We haven't seen any politicians kissing babies today, at least. Chris Morris, CEO of Full Fact, which checks and corrects facts reported in the news and on social media. We've seen Mr. Sunak out and about in the southwest. That's a key target battleground area for the Conservatives, particularly on seats where they might be very close to the Lib Dems. The Lib Dems really hoping that they can take away some of the Conservative stronghold down there.
Yeah, it means in some ways he's on the defensive down there because they've got a lot of seats to lose. And Rishi Sunak says he's not worried about the polls. And what else can he say? There is a long way to go. And I think we're sitting here talking about the election, but a lot of people are not yet focused on the politics. There's everyday life, there's family, there's big sporting or music events. And there will come a time when more people focus, perhaps next week when we know there's going to be the first debate between the party leaders. On the other hand, I think we also know that an awful lot of people make up their mind about how they're going to vote long before the election campaign begins. And I think that's why it's going to take something fairly extraordinary to turn things around. But Mr. Sunak is certainly putting up the fight. He's got the energy, he's going around the country and he's going to give it his best shot.
Lucy, I haven't come to you yet, so I want to get your thoughts. I mean, we're still early on in what will be a long election campaign. Chris mentioned those televised debates. Today it was confirmed the first one is going to happen on Tuesday. It's going to be on ITV at 9 o'clock. What are your thoughts ahead of that?
Well, look, I think the first TV debate is always a real moment in an election campaign, and one forgets because elections tend to be so many years apart that election campaigns are fairly chaotic by their nature. They can be quite bitty. The dynamic can shift over a day or 24, 48 hours, and I think that's what we've seen so far. We're not even into the first full week of it. It felt like Rishi Sunak had a very faltering first couple of days, and yet for the Labour Party, it's their debacle over the treatment of Diane Abbott, whether she will or won't be able to stand as a Labour MP at the election on July the 4th. It seems to have derailed Labour's bid today to talk about the NHS and its pledge to ensure that patients in England receive treatment within 18 weeks, a target they say they want to get to within the first 5 years, first term of the Labour government. Many people might not think that's a terribly ambitious pledge, but all the same, I'm not sure that many people will have heard it today because the Diane Abbott row has dominated the headlines. So it's shifting sands. I do think that when we look at the head-to-head that takes place every Wednesday in parliamentary term time between Starmer and Sunak, it is Sunak who tends to get the better of the Labour leader. He's a little bit more nimble on his feet in those exchanges. And I think, he does well in one sense when his back's against the wall. So I think that the Tory campaign is really hoping that on Tuesday at 9 p.m. it's going to be a moment for Rishi Sunak to try and get back on the front foot.
Okay, Nadine, do you think people are going to be watching these debates closely, and do you think they really make a difference when it comes to voters who are undecided?
I honestly don't think the average person watches and follows politics as closely as all of us do. I think that's one of the things that's difficult to comprehend as political journalists, when actually you talk to real people, the average person. Many people don't even know the name of the Prime Minister, so I think on average, probably most people won't be watching it. But obviously, more people than usual will be paying attention to politics, and I imagine there'll be a lot of people who will be learning Keir Starmer's name for the first time, potentially learning Rishi Sunak's name for the first time. So it's a first impression that these two people are going to be making, and I think that's why you'll see Keir Starmer go on a lot about his working class roots. His dad was a toolmaker and his mother was a nurse, because these things, while we've heard them, they've obviously heard them time and time and again over the last several years. Many people in the public have been, and these are the sorts of things that cut through. So I think it is important. I think the first debate just kind of set the tone, and it is a bit like a boxing match, these sorts of things. And so I do think it's important, but I also don't think we should overstate how many people will actually watch it, because unfortunately we're not a hugely politically engaged nation.
Yeah, it's a good point. And Chris, I'm going to bring you back in. We'll come back to you in a second, Martin. But Chris, when you're watching a televised debate, what you do, you're all about fact checking. How are you going to make sure that when Mr. Sunak or Mr. Starmer stands up and makes a claim, people know whether that's correct or not?
Well, we've got a team who are going to be doing that as quickly as possible. We also have automated fact-checking tools based on AI, which mean that we can use machines to check for the language in which claims are made. So we can do it quicker than ever before. Can we do it so you literally have a ticker tape running underneath the bottom of your screen the very second someone says something? No, we can't yet, but we can do it pretty quickly. And I think, fact-checking has become a bigger part of campaigns and of politics in general among the British media. Full Fact was kind of in on the ground floor, but a lot of other people are doing it now, because I think you look at the opinion polls, trust in politics, trust in politicians is at a 40-year low. And I think people realise that it's incumbent upon politicians to get their facts right and to be honest and accurate as far as they can. We know politics can be a dirty business. We're not naive about that. But we do think that honesty in the election campaign is important.
And Martin, do you think sometimes these televised debates can actually make things worse for a candidate?
Well, I think they can. Generally speaking, though, there aren't any knockout blows. I mean, I'm thinking back to 2010, when Nick Clegg was the leader of the Liberal Democrats, and the first debate that took place, there was this Clegg mania, which took place afterwards, and then people were actually talking in terms, rather fantastically about how the Liberal Democrats are going to have a huge surge and all of that. I think it is possible for people to change their perspective, but it tends to be rather instantaneous. So I think that while people may have an instant perception, maybe that person didn't do as well as we wanted them to, whether that actually goes through and changes people's voting intention, I think is a different matter entirely. And I think, great majority of people have probably made their mind up already what they're going to do.
Clegg mania, we haven't heard that phrase for a while. Martin, Chris, Nadine, Lucy, do stay with us. We've got plenty more politics to discuss. Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News. junior doctors in England are to stage another 5-day strike from the 27th of June until the 2nd of July. That's just days before the general election here. Talks with the government restarted 2 weeks ago, but they've broken down. The Doctors' Union, the British Medical Association, has been in dispute over junior doctors' pay for more than a year now. Well, for more on this, let's speak to Junior Doctor and Deputy Chair of the BMA UK Doctors Committee, Dr. Sumi Manirajan. Welcome to The Context, Dr. Sumi. Just tell us why you decided to take this action.
So we've been in dispute with the government now for over 20 months. They failed to come to the table with a credible offer and unfortunately forced us to take strike action yet again for the 11th time.
The Prime Minister has said that the timing of the strike, I quote, makes it look incredibly political. Is that what you're trying to do, derail the election or derail things for the Conservatives ahead of the election?
Not at all. The government have had 20 months to negotiate with us, and we were about to enter mediation when the government decided to call for an election. Now, we don't have any control of when the government decides to do that, but they've chosen to do it now with the dispute that's open with us. The reason that we are taking strike action is because our pay has dropped over 26% in the last 15 years, which resulted in doctors that have graduated medical school with £100,000 of debt being paid as little as £15 an hour. What we're asking for is for our pay to be restored. We aren't asking for a pay rise, we're asking for pay restoration.
And in terms of negotiations then, you're saying that so far, despite various rounds of talks, they've not got to where you want?
That's correct. The government have failed to put forward a credible offer. Now, to call off these strikes, Rishi Sunak needs to do something very simple. He needs to come forward with a credible offer, a public commitment that this will be implemented on the first day post-election, should he be successful being re-elected.
And one question many people ask when we have these conversations with people ahead of strike action is, what are your concerns about the impact on health services?
So we know that strike action, we're taking 10 rounds of strike action, can be safe. What we are asking for is for the Prime Minister to come forward with a credible offer, because if he does, we don't need to take strike action. But we've shown throughout this whole dispute that we can take safe strike action, because senior colleagues such as consultants and SAS doctors cover for us whilst we take strike action.
Okay, and assuming we don't know what the result of the election is going to be, but assuming the opinion polls might be correct and there is potentially a Labour Prime Minister in power, what would your message be to a new Prime Minister if that is the result after the 4th of July?
We're happy to negotiate with any government in power, and we're still happy for Rishi Sunak to come forward with an offer. If he does so, and there is another government in power, we're happy to use that offer, providing it's credible as a blueprint to how we can end the doctors' dispute. No doctor wants to be on strike. We want to be in hospitals providing care to the public. Unfortunately, this government has forced us out yet again.
Okay, Dr. Sumi Manirajan from the British Medical Association, thank you very much for sharing the reasons why you are calling for strike action once again. Well, let's return to our panel and ask them about this. Let's go back to Martin. Walkouts in Wales are on hold actually there where you are, because talks are taking place. So just bring us up to date on what's happening in Wales.
Well, there have been actually 10 days of industrial action since January in Wales, but they've reached a point where there's negotiations continuing between the Welsh Government in NHS Wales, which is controlled by the Welsh Government, and the BMA. And actually, the Welsh Government has, in statements that it's made, really sought to draw a bit of a distinction between the way that it's handling the dispute and the way that it's being handled over in England. And, for example, there was a statement made a few weeks ago at a time when it was decided that there were going to be more negotiations, where the Welsh Government said, this is a government that listens and engages to find solutions. And obviously there's an implicit criticism of the UK government there. So, of course, I mean, ultimately, there remains difficulty because the Welsh government's ability to pay big pay rises of the kind that the doctors want in order to restore, as they put it, their purchasing power is not entirely up to the Welsh government at all, because it depends on its funding for a block grant from Westminster.
Okay.
So that puts a constraint on what they can do. But it is interesting to make this comparison, I think.
Okay, thank you so much for the view from Wales there. That's Martin Shipton. Martin, Lucy, Chris, Nadine, I'll be back with you all after a short break. I'm Regina Vaidinathan, and this, of course, is The Context.
Hello, it's been another day of heavy downpours for some parts of the UK. I think they will become fewer and further between as we head towards the weekend. And even today, some of us got to see some sunshine. Gorgeous scenes there for a weather watcher in Whitstable in Kent. But this area of low pressure is still close by, so there is a bit more rain to come. In fact, this little weather feature bringing some really heavy downpours southwards across Scotland, and then getting down into parts of northern England as we head on through the night. We will also see some showers for Northern Ireland, pushing down into Wales and the southwest of England, but many other areas starting tomorrow morning on a dry note. Temperatures around 9, 10 or 11 degrees. So into tomorrow morning, this band of cloud and rain, quite heavy bursts of rain still, pushing southwards across northern England, down into Wales, into the Midlands, East Anglia, and then getting down towards the south coast, where it will break up into some sharp and perhaps thundery showers. More cloud and rain for this east coast of England. That will make it feel quite disappointing, particularly when combined with the strength of the winds. Further west, not as many showers, more dry weather, some spells of sunshine, and temperatures perhaps getting up to around 19 or possibly 20 degrees in sheltered spots. Now, as we move out of Thursday into Friday, the focus shifts from this area of low pressure, which starts to roll away eastwards, the focus shifting to this area of high pressure, just starting to build in from the west. Now, still clouds and some showery rain across some eastern counties of England. But further north and west, it should be largely dry. Spells of sunshine, a bit more cloud here as well into the northwest of Scotland. Maybe only 14 degrees for Stornoway, but given some sunshine, Glasgow, we get to 19 in Cardiff as well. Some spots likely to get to 20 degrees. And this area of high pressure still with us as we head into the weekend, but with some fairly large areas of cloud circulating around it. So it won't always be sunny. On Saturday, it does look like we'll see quite a lot of cloud across parts of England, maybe into Wales, and another bank of cloud trying to roll into Northern Ireland and the northwest of Scotland. But where we do see some sunshine, temperatures doing quite nicely, 20, perhaps up to 21 degrees. And as we head into the second half of the weekend, I think similar temperatures, high teens, low 20s Celsius, a fair amount of cloud at times, but still with some spells of sunshine.
The world of film is changing faster and faster all the time.
Our global Talking Movies team brings you up to date on the latest in movie making from around the world.
Stories from other cultures.
Interviewing top filmmakers and stars.
I don't think I've ever seen anything like that on screen.
From blockbusters to art house cinema, we'll spotlight the brilliant and unique voices bringing their stories to the big screen.
Talking Movies. Watch on BBC iPlayer.
For me, trust is about presence.
About fostering relationships all around the world, over years.
We're not chasing stories, we're already there.
It's about patience.
Not rushing to be the first, but striving to get it right.
To get to the truth. Precision.
Knowledge, facts.
Wading through endless waves of disinformation. We can't just ask the questions.
We have to question the answers. Debate, debate, debate. We have to create a space for opposing voices to be heard
and challenged.
We fight every day
to earn your trust, and we never take it for granted. We capture the story.
Fact-check the story.
We break the story.
We explore the story.
So you can trust us to tell it.
I'm Regina Vidinalden. You're watching The Context on BBC News. London's free newspaper, The Evening Standard, is to scrap its daily print edition and move to a weekly publication instead. Busy evening here in the newsroom, and let's return to that breaking news from New York and the latest in Donald Trump's hush money trial. Now, we heard earlier that the jury had returned to ask further questions. They wanted to hear some of the evidence again as they continue their deliberations. Well, let's go live to Manhattan and join my colleague, Neda Tawfiq, our North America correspondent. Neda, just bring us up to date on what's been happening where you are.
Yeah, well, Virginia, the jury has been sent home now. They haven't reached a verdict yet. They are still about nearly 5 hours into their deliberations, but the judge had said that today would end around now, and that further days in court would potentially go later. But jurors had twice rung a bell to say that they had 2 notes for the judge. The latest note said that they wanted the judge to reread parts of his instructions to them. He wants them to clarify what exactly, which parts of those they want reread. But the real meat of what they asked for earlier, Regini, was to have testimony reread to them from 2 people. First, David Pecker, the former publisher of the National Enquirer. He was the first witness that prosecutors put up. And prosecutors in their closing arguments said that his testimony was extremely destructive and devastating for Donald Trump, and that his testimony standed on its own. And what they want to hear from his testimony is a meeting he had in Trump Tower in August of 2015 with Donald Trump and Michael Cohen. They want to reread that testimony about that meeting. They also want testimony from a phone call he had with Donald Trump ahead of an investor meeting when Donald Trump told him that he knew who Karen McDougal was. And finally, they want to reread his testimony from when he decided not to sell Donald Trump, to get reimbursed from Donald Trump for paying hush money to the former Playboy model Karen McDougal. And then the second person they want testimony from is Michael Cohen, the prosecution's star witness. They also want to read what he said in that August 2015 Trump Tower meeting, which prosecutors said is where the entire catch and kill scheme was hatched to kill negative stories about Donald Trump to help his campaign.
And Neda, this trial has lasted, some 6 weeks or so, and it's heard from dozens of witnesses. Just remind us what the main arguments were from the prosecution and the defence as the jury now continues its deliberations.
Yeah, well, Regini, closing arguments yesterday went well into the evening, so both sides could try to win over the jury. From the prosecution, they say this is ultimately about Donald Trump trying to defraud the American voter in 2016 before the election. They say that he tried to hide damaging information from them to prevent another sex scandal from coming out with the Stormy Daniels, the former adult film star, paying her $130,000 through his former lawyer, Michael Cohen, for her to keep quiet about an alleged sexual encounter that Donald Trump continues to deny. And they said that that was all a conspiracy. And then there was a cover-up, that he falsified business records to disguise the reimbursement to Cohen for that hush money payment by putting it in business records as legal expenses. But when you hear from the defense, they say this is all a lie. Donald Trump is innocent, that Michael Cohen, his former lawyer, is just out for revenge and has lied about Donald Trump's intent, that Donald Trump never intended to defraud anyone and genuinely thought he was paying Michael Cohen for legal services.
Okay, Neda Tawfiq, with the very latest from the courtroom in Manhattan, thank you very much. And just a reminder that we have live updates on the BBC News website, where we continue to run a live page with all of the developments on the case and the trial in New York. Well, let's get back to the UK general election. I'm still joined by my panel and we'll discuss more issues in a moment. But the Conservatives are promising 100,000 more apprenticeships per year by the end of the next Parliament, funded by scrapping what they call rip-off university courses. Well, how would it work? Our education editor, Bronwyn Jeffries, reports from Birmingham.
Universities in England already have to meet minimum standards, and the regulator can fine them if they don't. The Conservatives want to go further and close down courses that are deemed to be of low value. For the first time, that could include taking graduate earnings into account, and that might squeeze some creative subjects. It's also not clear exactly how much money it would save. There's no limit on the number of university places available in England, so it's up to students what they decide.
I know a lot of people that I know would rather do an apprenticeship than a uni degree.
I believe every single degree has value.
The Conservative Skills Promise involves creating 100,000 extra apprenticeships a year by the end of the next Parliament. The party says by then it would cost £885 million. Large employers already have to put cash into supporting apprenticeships, but each year around £550 million of that is handed back to the government unspent, raising questions about employers' willingness to get involved in creating new apprenticeships. So for these changes to happen, it requires both students and employers to make different decisions, and that's beyond the control of any government. Bronwyn Jeffries, BBC News, Birmingham.
Well, I'm joined still by our panel, Martin Shipton, Lucy Fisher, Nadine Batchelor-Hunt, and Chris Morris, who's in the studio with me. So a promise there from the Conservative Party for 100,000 more apprenticeships per year. Also, Mr Sunak saying that many university courses are rip-offs. Chris, what do you make of all that?
Well, it's interesting, that after days in which it seems like the Conservatives were going after issues which would attract elderly voters or voters over the age of 65, things like the triple plus pension promise, things like national service, although aimed at younger people, seems more to appeal to an older generation. This is clearly aimed at trying to attract potentially younger voters. Although I do think there's a bit of a sting in the tail. I know they won't say what they think the rip-off degrees they want to replace are. And I think for a lot of students who are paying more than £9,000 a year in tuition fees, they probably wouldn't like to be told by the government that the degrees they're doing and for which they are accumulating quite a large amount of debt are a rip-off. I think it's clear we do need more apprenticeships, and so that makes sense. But I think that the optics of calling a lot of university degrees rip-offs are perhaps not quite so wise.
Nadine, I'm going to bring you in on this. What do you make of this? Chris saying that this is clearly an appeal to younger voters. Is this an appeal that's likely to work?
You know, there is a growing sense among a lot of young people that going to university just doesn't, leave you with a good job at the end of all of it. But what I will say is that when I've spoken to stakeholders about the current situation of apprenticeships, there's a lot of unhappiness about the lack of flexibility on them. And I think what your reporter pointed out about how £550 million worth of apprenticeship that are going unclaimed each year is demonstrative of that problem. And what they've been calling for is greater reform. So, apprenticeships have to have the ability to be shorter, and therefore they can get more people through rather than having fixed terms on them. And that sort of thing, that could have a real impact on the number of apprenticeships. But instead, we're seeing this big number, and obviously, big numbers are something that you expect to see in elections, that they want to grab headlines with them. But my biggest kind of takeaway from all of this is what is industry asking for? From what I've gathered from over the last months and year or so, as talking to industry about apprenticeships, is that they weren't asking for this, they're asking for the flexibility and reform of the current existing system so that levy doesn't keep going unclaimed.
Okay, thanks Nadine. Lucy, I'm going to bring you in. This comes a couple of days after the Conservatives were calling for national service. So, how would you say these two are connected, if at all?
Well, in a sense, I think that slating so-called Mickey Mouse courses, which is how the Conservatives have described the kind of rip-off courses that they want to ban, is in a way appealing to older, more traditional voters. It suggests to me, we can read from this, that the Tories are pursuing a core vote strategy. They're worried about the kind of voters that could split off from them and vote for reform, and therefore in key marginals see those seats fall to Labour. So I think there is a thread that can be drawn between the two policies. And look, both are certainly eye-catching as well. At this far behind in the polls, most polls put them on average about 20, 21 points behind Labour. The suggestion is that Keir Starmer could be heading for a huge landslide unless they narrow significantly in the next 6 weeks. It's worth it. That's the calculation that's been made by people in the Conservative campaign to kind of go all out with these kind of quite bold, radical policies that they may not have to put into effect, but that at least get people sitting up and talking about them. Because another concern that has really gripped some senior Tory officials is that since the mini budget of Liz Truss in October 2022, many members of the public have just tuned out of Tory politics. So they need these kind of radical proposals to try and get people interested again in what they're saying.
Let's bring Martin in on this. Do we know much about what the other parties are proposing when it comes to finding policies to engage younger people, particularly when it comes to educational opportunities?
Well, first of all, I don't think this apprenticeship idea and the idea of getting rid of so-called Mickey Mouse degrees would apply in Wales, because education, of course, has devolved to Wales, and it's highly unlikely that the Welsh Government is going to want to go along with this kind of rhetoric. I mean, I think that so far as many young people are concerned, the difficulty is that once they get their qualification, there aren't necessarily the jobs available for them to go into, which, as it were, gives them a payback on what they've invested by their educational time. And I think really what it all comes down to is the need for economic growth and for there to be an expansion of opportunities for people to be working in industries which are expanding and where we've got export opportunities. And frankly, Brexit has done an enormous amount of damage to the economy of the UK, where there isn't the flexibility that there once was, where we were having people coming in to the country, there were people having the opportunity to travel around and get work elsewhere. Now you've got a sense that in many cases people are landed with huge debts, but they end up working on supermarket tills. I mean, this is a very major problem, and this is something which I think young people are very concerned about and probably are quite disillusioned about in terms of the lack of offer to them, which is coming from all parties.
Okay, I'm just going to bring Chris in. Can you sort of fact check what Martin's just said there then? Is that correct?
It's broadly correct, yeah. I mean, it's I haven't got the details in front of me of everything he said, but yes, I think it is broadly correct.
Okay, thank you very much. A live fact checker there. Martin, Lucy, Nadine, Chris will be back with you shortly. Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News. The London newspaper, the Evening Standard, announced it's set to scrap its daily editions in favour of a weekly publication. The newspaper is currently circulated free of charge at the capital's underground stations from Monday to Friday, but the paper is blaming home working and the availability of Wi-Fi on the tube for the drop in circulation. Well, I've still got my panel with me, and I've actually got a copy, a physical copy of the Evening Standard, There you go. It's a rare antique, or it will be a rare antique soon, I'm sure. Lucy, I'll bring you in first. You work for a paper, which is also, of course, online now. Do you think this is just a sad state of affairs, or the direction of travel now in a growing digital world?
Well, look, I think the scale of the Evening Standard's losses, £84.5 million in the past 6 years, is just obviously not sustainable, and that's what the publisher has said today. In a nostalgic sense, I feel sad that another paper won't be publishing, daily, but obviously they've got a strategy in place to move to a weekly publication, and I wish them well on that front. I do think this is the direction of travel. The pandemic accelerated a trend we were already seeing, which is people want to consume news more online, on apps, on their mobile devices while they're on their commute or going about their business during the day, rather than having a physical, more unwieldy copy to sort of, fold and hold under their arm. So I think this is probably the direction of travel, but it is a sad day, like me, inky-fingered, and like to read it in its physical edition.
Yeah, I mean, we won't get ink on our fingers anymore either, will we? Martin, what do you make of all of this? I mean, I find it impossible to do a crossword online, so I'm going to miss the Evening Standard for that alone.
Well, until just over a year ago, I worked for Reach PLC. I used to work for the Western Mail, which was a morning paper in Wales. And unfortunately, the circulation has declined considerably since the advent of the website. In the last 15 to 20 years, newspaper circulations have really gone down. But the difficulty facing the industry is getting revenue from digital, and Reach has gone down the path of not wanting to have any paywalls. I mean, Lucy works for the FT, and of course they have a paywall, very successful. But for most local newspapers and regional newspapers, and we can say Welsh national papers, that really isn't working. And the irony is that despite the huge circulation losses, 70% of the revenue still comes from print, because you cannot make nearly as much advertising revenue from digital as you can from print. So it's a huge challenge to the newspaper industry and the news industry generally.
Interesting. I'll bring Nadine in, because Nadine, you work for a digital first publication. What do you make of the Evening Standard now just going to a weekly print edition? Are you mourning the loss?
Yeah, I think it is sad. I mean, I love books and reading, I love newspapers, but I do think particularly for my generation, I mean, I don't really know anybody that buys newspapers anymore. And obviously, the Evening Standard was free, you could pick up on the tube, but if you can get your news on your phone, I mean, my generation, rightly or wrongly, tends to consume everything on our phones, then it does kind of make the paper copy redundant. So I think it is the direction of travel. I think it is the future, and I think it is one of those things that will dwindle. I think, certain publications like the FT, the Times have a good model that works. They have a kind of loyal reader base that will continue to buy their papers and continue to allow them to publish. But I do think, particularly for papers like the Evening Standard, which were free, I do think this is the direction of travel, and I do think this is how media is going to look in the future. And I think it becomes more of a challenge when everything's online.
Okay, we've run out of time. I'm going to hold this copy up and say goodbye to you all. Nadine, Chris, Martin and Lucy, thanks very much for joining me on the panel. And thanks to all of you for watching. This is The Context. I'm Regina Biden-Arden. See you back tomorrow.
Hello, I'm Mark Edwards with your sport from the BBC Sports Centre. We're going to start with golf, and all charges against world #1 Scotty Scheffler have been dropped following his arrest at the USPGA Championship earlier this month. The American was arrested outside Valhalla Golf Club while trying to navigate heavy traffic hours before his second round at the tournament. The charges included reckless driving and disregarding traffic signals from an officer.
It's obvious he didn't do anything wrong, and as I've said repeatedly, the more evidence that comes out, the more it shows that Scotty was a victim here. And I think everybody sees something like this happen and realizes they're one wrong turn or running into the wrong person away from going to jail themselves.
Right, so our attention now to the French Open in Paris. It was a thrilling and dramatic contest between defending champion and world #1 Iga Świątek and quadruple Grand Slam winner Naomi Osaka in a tense first set. It was the informed Świątek with 4 titles to her name already this season who took it on a tiebreak before Osaka dominated the second, overpowering her opponent to take it 6 and seemingly out, somehow surviving break points and even a match point to take the set 7-5. She's now won.
Honestly, it's not the worst. Like, I felt worse for sure. I cried when I got off the court, but then, you know, for me, I kind of realized, like, I was watching Ego, like, win this tournament last year, and I was pregnant, and it was just my dream to, like, be able to play her. So when I kind of think of it like that, I think I'm doing pretty well.
Over on the men's side, Carlos Alcaraz needed to dig deep to beat inspired qualifier Jesper de Jong and reach the French Open third round. The Spaniard looked subdued at times in a 6-3, 6-4, 2-6, 6-2 victory over a player ranked 100.
He dominated most of the points in the first set, and it was struggling to get to my good tennis or the tennis that I was playing in the first and the second set. And then in the fourth set, I had to fight. I had to overcome the problems that I had most of the time with myself. But really happy that I could get the win in a good way at the end.
It's the final of the Europa Conference League in Athens. Olympiacos trying to become the first Greek football side to win a European club competition. They're up against Fiorentina, the runners-up in the tournament last year. Love to be able to really dress this up for you, even create a little bit of tension, but no, it is 0-0. We're into the 4th minute of added time out of 7. It really looks like we're going to go into extra time. I suppose I should tell you, Fiorentina did come closest taking the lead. Nikola Milenkovic scuffing a shot past the keeper from the corner in the first half, but VAR reeling it out for offside. 0-0 as we speak. As that time of year, the off-season managerial merry-go-round, if you will. This one from Burnley to Bavaria. Vincent Kompany has been appointed Bayern Munich head coach on a 3-year deal. Former Manchester City captain retired from playing in 2020. He moved from Anderlecht to manage Burnley in 2022 and guided them to promotion to the Premier League last year. In his first season in charge, the Clarets, though, did suffer relegation from the top flight in May after finishing 19th. Finally, a rematch between the undisputed heavyweight champion Alexander Usyk and Tyson Fury will take place on December the 21st, according to officials in Saudi Arabia. Usyk became the first man to beat Fury when he won on a split decision just under 2 weeks ago, but it's unlikely that all 4 heavyweight belts will be on the line in the rematch. The IBF planning to strip Usyk as he will not be facing its mandatory challenger next. And to cricket, England's women have won the 3rd ODI against Pakistan in Chelmsford in what was a fabulous batting display courtesy of Siva Brunt. Incredible, 124 off 117 balls, laying the platform. It was her 9th century in 106 ODI matches. England 302 for 9, and they won by, in the end, 178 runs in what was ultimately a very simple match for the England side. And that's our sport for now. From me, Mark Edwards, and the rest of the team, bye-bye.
Hello, it's been another day of heavy downpours for some parts of the UK. I think they will become fewer and further between as we head towards the weekend. And even today, some of us got to see some sunshine. Gorgeous scenes there for a weather watcher in Whitstable in Kent. But this area of low pressure is still close by, so there is a bit more rain to come. In fact, this little weather feature bringing some really heavy downpours southwards across Scotland, and then getting down into parts of northern England as we head on through the night. We will also see some showers for Northern Ireland, pushing down into Wales and the southwest of England, but many other areas starting tomorrow morning on a dry note. Temperatures around 9, 10 or 11 degrees. So into tomorrow morning, this band of cloud and rain, quite heavy bursts of rain still, pushing southwards across northern England, down into Wales, into the Midlands, East Anglia, and then getting down towards the south coast, where it will break up into some sharp and perhaps thundery showers, more cloud and rain for this east coast of England. That will make it feel quite disappointing, particularly when combined with the strength of the winds. Further west, not as many showers, more dry weather, some spells of sunshine, and temperatures perhaps getting up to around 19 or possibly 20 degrees in sheltered spots. As we move out of Thursday into Friday, the focus shifts from this area of low pressure, which starts to roll away eastwards, the focus shifting to this area of high pressure, just starting to build in from the west. Now, still clouds and some showery rain across some eastern counties of England, but further north and west it should be largely dry, spells of sunshine, a bit more cloud here as well into the northwest of Scotland, maybe only 14 degrees for Stornoway, but given some sunshine, Glasgow we get to 19 in Cardiff as well, some spots likely to get to 20 degrees. And this area of high pressure still with us as we head into the weekend, but with some fairly large areas of cloud circulating around it, so it won't always be sunny. On Saturday, it does look like we'll see quite a lot of cloud across parts of England, maybe into Wales, and another bank of cloud trying to roll into Northern Ireland and the northwest of Scotland. But where we do see some sunshine, temperatures doing quite nicely, 20 up to 21 degrees. And as we head into the second half of the weekend, I think similar temperatures, high teens, low 20s Celsius, a fair amount of cloud at times, but still with some spells of sunshine.
Between now and the 1st of June, nearly 970 million eligible voters will go to the polls across India
as the world's largest democracy holds its general election. Reporting from across this vast country will take you closer to the elections,
getting you comprehensive on-the-ground coverage.
We'll look at the issues that matter as Prime Minister Narendra Modi seeks a third term in power,
with dozens of opposition parties banding together
to take them on. The India election on BBC News.
The art of good conversation is to say the right thing at the right time and in the right way. You have to be original, sympathetic, encouraging, and also keep an open mind. And you really do just need to sit back and listen.
Catty Kay chats with prominent names from the worlds of business, science, and culture.
Influential with me, Catty Kay.
This is BBC One in the East. Now the BBC News with Clive Myrie and Alex Dunlop at 10 o'clock.
At 10, will she or won't she be able to stand at the general election? Diane Abbott's future as a Labour MP hangs in the balance. Attending a rally of supporters tonight, she said the party wants her out.
They haven't given a reason for banning me. They just want me excluded from Parliament.
Also tonight, investigators say the Singapore Airlines flight that hit severe turbulence, leading to the death of a man, dropped 178 feet in less than 5 seconds. Jurors in Donald Trump's hush money criminal trial in New York end their first day with deliberations. And up and away, the battle of the balloons between North and South Korea.
Here in the East, Norfolk becomes the latest police force to reduce its response to mental health call-outs, despite concerns. And tens of thousands turn out for one of the region's biggest agricultural shows.
Available. Been doing it for years. Soon our customers will be asking for it too. They already are.
Diane Abbott can't stand for Labour at the general election. The suspension from the party ended last night following comments on race that she made in a letter to a newspaper last year. But she told supporters in East London this evening that Labour wants her excluded from Parliament. A claim Sir Keir Starmer says isn't true. Joe Pine has our top story.
At the last election, she was Labour's pick to be Home Secretary. This time round, Diane Abbott may not be allowed to run for the party at all.
They just want me excluded from Parliament. So what happened? What happened to political independence?
But talking of independence, it's unclear if she has a plan B.
Where do you stand as an independent, Diane? What's your message to Keir Starmer?
This morning she told the BBC, "I am banned from standing as a Labour candidate." It took almost 5 hours until that was officially challenged.
No, that's not true. No decision has been taken to bar Diane Abbott. The process that we were going through ended with the restoration of the whip the other day. So she's a member of the Parliamentary Labour Party, and no decision has been taken barring her.
This row has been rumbling for more than a year after the veteran MP said Jewish, Irish and traveller people do not face racism all their lives. She apologised but was suspended and only readmitted as a Labour MP last night. Over decades, Diane Abbott built a reputation as a passionate and outspoken politician, but almost always from the backbenches. It was only with the assent of her friend and ally Jeremy Corbyn that she got close to power, reaching the shadow cabinet in 2015, nearly 30 years after her historic arrival in Parliament.
As Britain's first black woman MP.
But since Keir Starmer took over, he's been consistently critical of him on social media. Among Diane Abbott's constituents, some say it's time to go.
I think she has the opportunity to retire with dignity on what significant record. I personally would like the opportunity to vote for a different Labour candidate.
While at tonight's Stand for Diane rally, others are unhappy with the Labour leader. What do you think of how Keir Starmer has handled this?
I'm disappointed with him as a leader. I would really like to be behind him. But this has made me just a bit shaky.
It's like a setup. He's been very offensive. He's treated her appallingly with total lack of respect.
Safe seats like this are rarely of interest in a general election. The Diane Abbott row has changed that. Some within the party argue today's confusion has been damaging and distracting from their key campaign messages. Others say it supports Keir Starmer's key argument. But over the last 5 years, Labour has changed. The final decision on Diane Abbott's future lies with the party's national executive.
Now, with all the stories making the headlines this Wednesday, it's the ITV News at 10.
Diane Abbott hits back at Keir Starmer amid the row over her future in the Labour Party. The veteran MP insists she was banned from standing in the general election. Labour says no decision had been made, but at a rally tonight she vowed to defend her seat.
By any means possible, I will be the candidate that has been
As the row over her future overshadowed Labour's day of campaigning, it leaves Keir Starmer with a difficult choice to make. Will he or won't he allow her to stand? Also tonight. Junior doctors set to strike on the eve of the general election. The PM says the timing is politically motivated. The two party leaders prepare to go head-to-head in their first televised debate.
Mother and Teresa could not be discharged.
The jury in the Donald Trump hush money trial begin deliberations. England's dynamo Declan Rice sits down to talk leadership and the Euros with Steve and rescued from being sold at a knockdown price, the long-lost masterpiece finally on a show in Spain.
Up to speed on all the music that you missed out on.
This is ITV News at 10 with Gamal Nandale.
Good evening. For Sir Keir Starmer and his team, this was meant to be the day when Labour showcased its plan for clearing the NHS waiting list backlog. But the party's first big campaign launch has been overshadowed by a growing row over the veteran MP Diane Abbott. Earlier today, Sir Keir had to deny reports that Miss Abbott had been barred from defending her advocacy as a Labour. But Miss Abbott, the first black woman elected to Parliament, said she was dismayed at suggestions she would not be allowed to stand. And speaking to a crowd of supporters in her constituency tonight, she vowed to remain their MP for as long as it is possible and by any means possible.
Tonight, veteran Labour MP Diane Abbott, flanked by supporters who took her into the heart of a rally in her name.
I joined the Labour Party as a young woman nearly 50 years ago.
Outside Hackney Town Hall, her hand shaking slightly, Abbott reacted to a party row that has engulfed her.
I was shocked to learn yesterday that I am going to be banned from running for the Labour Party.
Reacting to reports claiming Labour will not let her stand here to be an MP again, she warned.
By any means possible, I will be the candidate that Hackney
It was a moment in East London that threw the focus back onto party leader Keir Starmer, who had earlier been forced to deny the suggestion his party had already decided to block her.
No, that's not true. No decision has been taken to bar Diane Abbott. The process that we were going through ended with the restoration of the whip the other day. So she's a member of the Parliament.
The story began in April last year with this letter to the Observer, in which Abbott said Jewish people were not all their lives subject to racism. She was suspended from the Parliamentary Labour Party and faced a months-long investigation. We now know that finished in December,
Been on
with
more
Abbott
than
completing
3
anti-Semitism
hours
course
now.
in February as requested.
About
But
4
there was
hours.
no news about
That's
her
been
readmission to the
running
party
for.
until ITV News
Still
revealed
working.
yesterday that she had finally had the parliamentary whip restored. Then, within minutes, this article claiming Labour was going to ban her.
And I declare that the same died
It's also one in the
Abbott's case
Parliament.
is more emotionally charged than most.
has been duly elected to serve as a member of Parliament.
Because this was such an historic moment 37 years ago. Ask almost any Labour woman about Diane Abbott, and whichever wing of the party, they'd call her a trailblazer who smashed ceilings as Britain's first black MP, which is why so many in the party want her to be treated with respect. It's my understanding that Labour had tried to negotiate a deal with Abbott, about whom there have been health concerns over the years, to retire with dignity in a time of her choosing. I'm even told that Starmer had a pre-written statement celebrating her career ready to go. But now, her friends are really upset by how this has been handled.
You ought to be treated with some respect and with some dignity. And, you know, it may well have been that the decision was that Brian didn't want to stand, but I think it's the way that it's been done.
Some allies had told ITV News that Abbott wanted to retire, but in her own way. Simply did not want to be humiliated. The briefings against her seem to have changed her mind.
And Anishka joins us from the Peston programme studio. Anishka, this is a growing problem for Sir Keir Starmer. What does he do now?
Well, talking to some senior people in the party, some who are very close to this process, they simply say this is a mess. They really genuinely thought they were close to a deal that they felt Diane Abbott was also happy with. But actually, people on both sides told me that she did genuinely want to retire. But that briefing to the Times, it exploded a bomb in this entire process, and the result has been trust blown on both sides. If Diane Abbott had wanted to retire, now this feels like a matter of principle to her. And you might say, well, if she's the selected MP, why wouldn't she be able to stand if the disciplinary case is over? The reason for that is that the National Executive Committee of the Labour Party has a meeting next Tuesday, June the 4th, where it endorses all its candidates. So in theory, it can block anyone. Now, usually it wouldn't block a sitting MP, but that is the moment where a decision could be made. The difficulty for Keir Starmer is there are plenty in his party on all wings who really want Diane Abbott to be treated with respect.
Okay, Anishka, thank you.
Once again, this is going on to about 7 o'clock in the morning. Right cut out, it might not. I don't know what's going to happen.
Junior doctors in England made an announcement of their own.
If that cuts out before 7 o'clock, then it means it goes flat and the phone goes flat.
The timing is difficult for the Tories too, who condemn the strike as highly cynical.
Just minutes before Keir Starmer and Wes Streeting walked into this room full of trainee healthcare workers, junior doctors announced 5 days of strikes in England, starting a week before the election. The doctors say they gave up on talks because the government wasn't serious.
They've left us with no other option. And this is the same Secretary of State who said that there was a further offer to be presented after we called for striking action in December. But still, 6 months on, there has been no further offer, let alone a credible one that we could have taken to our membership.
If Labour win the election just after the strikes end, this will be Wes Streeting's problem to fix.
If you get into government, we can pay junior doctors more. I've been very honest with junior doctors, so I want to treat them with respect and courtesy this side of the election. To say, look, 35%, I'm afraid, in all honesty, I'm not going to be able to live on day one of the Labour government. But let's sit down and negotiate and pay. Let's do as much as we can, as fast as we can.
Junior doctor strikes have already delayed 1.3 million appointments and made it incredibly difficult for the Prime Minister to meet his commitment to reduce waiting lists.
Right.
Okay, surely have done without a mid-election reminder of that.
Today's action by the junior doctors, on the same day as the Labour Party are having a health day, does slightly ponder the question as to whether this is politically motivated. Hard to escape that conclusion given the timing of the corner strike in an election campaign, especially as we found a constructive resolution with the remainder of the NHS workforce.
The Labour Party had wanted to talk about their NHS backlog plan today, involving 40,000 extra appointments a week created by staff working overtime on evenings and at weekends, and paid for by £1.3 billion raised from a clampdown on tax evasion. But it does depend on whether NHS staff want to do the overtime.
I wouldn't have the time to do that, and I wouldn't be able to commit fully to meet my patients' needs, so it wouldn't be something I would do right now.
Yes, I'll be willing, so long as it does not impact or stress our normal pattern of work. It wasn't specific what he meant by overtime, so I'm just going to wait and see.
And the plan won't work if the strikes aren't settled.
Whoever forms the next government, if they want to bring down those historically high waiting lists, then solving industrial action is going to be a key part of that and an urgent thing to resolve swiftly.
Whether it's Keir Starmer or Rishi Sunak who appoints the next health secretary, the top of their in tray on June the 5th will look pretty similar. Cardigan News at 10.
So plenty to chew on already then for the first of the televised head-to-head election debates between Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer, which has been set for next week. It'll be broadcast on ITV next Tuesday evening, the 4th of June, at 9 p.m. Julie Etchingham moderating. Both leaders have told us they are looking forward to taking on their opponents.
Remember this?
Yeah, I agree with
A milestone in British broadcasting. The first ever TV debate with Gordon Brown unusually praising a rival leader. Nearly 10 million people watched.
We now come to Prime Minister's questions.
Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer have faced each other across the dispatch box many times. In next Tuesday's debate, the questions will be from voters. Are they ready for that?
I am looking forward to the ITV debate because I get the chance to talk directly to your viewers and to make our argument and to say to them the choice is really clear. You've had 14 years of chaos and division and failure. We can turn a page on that. Well, I'm looking forward to the debate on Tuesday, and the choice of this election is increasingly clear. Bold action with a clear plan for a more secure future with the Conservatives, or back to square one with no plan and no certainty with Labour.
Back in 2010, there were 3 debates featuring the Prime Minister Gordon Brown, David Cameron and Nick Clegg. Negotiations in 2015 failed to reach a consensus. Eventually, one 7-way battle was agreed. After calling a snap election in 2017, Theresa May refused to take part in any debate, something she later said she regretted. In 2019, there were 2 head-to-head debates between Prime Minister Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn. There were other debates which included senior figures from other parties.
I'm really glad you brought up this topic.
They may have been busy on the campaign trail, but behind the scenes, debate preparations will already be underway, and not just on policies, as one former media advisor.
We will do physical rehearsals where somebody from Keir Starmer's team will pretend to be Rishi Sunak and vice versa. Somebody in Sunak's team will physically actually pretend to be Keir Starmer. They will practice the physicality